All right. Looks like we're on the air. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to welcome you to the public hearing on the Gilman lofts. We have a good agenda. We're going to be approving some minutes first, and then we'll get into the public hearing on Gilman Worklofts. So I trust that everybody's had a chance to read the minutes from last month. So does anybody have a motion to make on that?
Move to approve.
Any discussion or questions? All those that approve, say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Opposed? All right, looks like they're approved. So, Lucy, I think you're up.
Good evening. I'm Lucy Sloman, Land Development Manager. And we're going to start with the quasi-judicial part of the meeting. As many of you know, a site development permit of a certain size triggers a site development permit. In this case, it's in central Issaquah. It's a building over a certain size or a site over 3 acres. This site is, the building is big enough to have triggered that. I have UVDC, sorry about that. DC is the decision maker, so luckily the right people are here. And the type of decision is quasi-judicial. So when it's a quasi-judicial decision, that means that proceedings have to be like a court and be both fair and appear fair. We do that in 2 ways. One is procedural due process, and the other is substantive due process. For procedural due process, it means that we follow a specific process. We send out notifications, and all the decision is made on the record. Substantive due process means that we follow adopted regulations as the substance on which the decision is based. So I would ask that the commissioners read through the questions up on the screen, and once you're done, I'll ask you some questions. So how many commissioners answer no to all the questions? Okay, great. That was all no's. Ex parte communications are communications that take place outside of the hearing. And I would ask commissioners to identify if any ex parte communications have taken place related to this permit. Yes, Mr. Morgan?
So after the last meeting, when we were leaving, a member of the public approached me, asked a question about the version of the standards being used, which I said I thought Lucy had covered in the meeting. The other question was on the intent of the mid-block crossing in the design standards codes, and I discussed that shortly and should not have. Thought it was more of a theoretical discussion, but this project was still alive and should not have discussed it. I don't believe it affects my judgment with regard to this project, but I have to put that out there. Shouldn't have done it.
Any other commissioners?
So, like Mr. Morgan, Commissioner Morgan, I was also approached, standing next to Commissioner Morgan. So his summary of that conversation, I think, reflects that. I also do not believe it will affect my objectivity and ability to make a fair decision related to this permit.
Thank you. Anyone else?
A member of the public also approached me and asked me what version of the standards, the architecture and design standards manual I had, and which version we were using, and showed me a preliminary map in a version of one of the standards. And I said we were using the standards that were identified in the meeting. That was all.
Anyone else? Does anyone in the audience object to the participation of the commissioners? Okay. Thank you. So,
Lucy, I have a question.
Yep.
But remind me, if you will, about what the standard is now, or the expectation is of us regarding looking at a site, not this site, but looking at a site. So we know something is coming up at this location. We're not really familiar with the lay of the land as it is.
So we have talked to the city attorney. He took a different position than the previous source that we were using. So you can go visit a site. But I do think there are a couple of things to point out. One is you can't draw any conclusions. So you need to be open-minded to other information about the site that would be presented. And it's probably prudent to, during this quasi-judicial discussion, to identify that you visited the site and sort of what you did while you were there and if you were with anyone else, just so that no one can question that later on.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, so here's where we are. We're doing this a little differently than we have in the past, where we have one presentation related to the briefing response memo. There was so much discussion last time about the architectural and urban design manual, how we use it. Had we done a good, as thorough a job as the commission wanted? There was a lot of good comments made. So our thought is to focus on that first, and then we will have the second part of the meeting focused on the rest of the topics in the briefing response memo. I want to note that I realized today that we had not given you an updated version of the overall checklist that is from the manual. So those are available at your place, and I also provided you with a clean one. So if you care to use that as any kind of tracking device or putting your own notations on it, you can. You'll notice that some things have red dotted boxes around them. Those are the items that were changed from the version you received at the last meeting. And I have that if we need to put it up on screen. What we're going to do tonight, I'm going to start with a brief PowerPoint presentation. And then the reason I have my laptop up here is I have the ability to pull up both the what staff identified as the relevant sheets and all the markings that we already sent out to you. Then I have a blank one that we can go through as well. And I can mark that as we go through, just so that everyone can see that as part of it. Now, the one piece that we didn't really specify is how the commission would like to integrate in public comment, whether you would like to do that, like I can do the PowerPoint and you could take comment, or I could do the PowerPoint and we could go through the checklist and then you could take comment. Or you could wait and take comment after Dan's done his whole presentation. The only thing is that as we go through the checklist, we're going to mark it off, so that might indicate that we would need to go back and you consider whether any of the conditions or markings would be revised based on public comment before we finalize that. So we're all kind of feeling our way through the best way to do this. I don't know if you have thoughts.
So reiterate the options here.
So they're going to be, I have a two-part presentation. One is a PowerPoint, which is some sections from the briefing response memo related to the design manual. Then I have the actual selected pages that staff identified as relevant. And then after that, Dan is going to present the rest of the briefing response memo. So you could do it after the PowerPoint, my PowerPoint. You could do it after the checklist. You could do it again after Dan's or only after Dan's.
Okay, I don't know what the other commissioners are. I'd like to see the checklist, go through the checklist and then have public comment.
Have Lucy go through the checklist and then public comment and then us.
Right.
Is that what you mean?
Was that your intent?
That was not my intent, but
Yeah,
I
I was
am
gonna
totally,
say,
I am totally open.
missing a little bit.
So I can definitely go through the checklist. I mean, that's an interesting point. I could go through and sort of summarize how staff evaluated the project. Then we could take public comment. and then the commissioners could go through it, then we wouldn't have to do it again. You wouldn't have to go back and revisit it after public
That was my
comment. So
thought.
that makes sense.
Is that the only time that we're going to be doing the check, or will we be doing the checklist at the end of the whole meeting after the applicant has spoken? I mean, I like the way this is going so far, but it's not clear to me when the checklist will be done and...
Okay, so option 5.C. So I can do my PowerPoint. I could go through staff's evaluation of the checklist. We could either take public testimony then or not. If you're not going to go through the checklist, which your point is well taken, Commissioner Harrison, Dan could do his presentation. Then we could have the applicant do their presentation for everything, and then take public comment, and then go back and fill out the checklist.
I like that idea. Twice.
Yeah, I just want to make sure we get public comment before we do anything permanent.
I completely agree.
I would second that.
So maybe the best thing to do is go through the PowerPoint, see how everybody feels. If they feel like moving ahead, then we could have you go through the checklist or the staff checklist, see how everybody feels, and then, I mean, we're filling it out, so
Right.
trying to get a sense of what the best thing to do is.
Absolutely, and I appreciate all your input. It's very helpful. And to that point, the form that you receive with staff's evaluation, that was just us trying to use the documents we have. I hope that either as we're going through it or at the end, we can do a conclusion, because we have hired a graphic designer now to prepare the final manual, and we've actually increased the budget for them to prepare a form for our use. So I'm very interested in hearing your thoughts about, I'm not suggesting this form is the right thing to use, but what it tells you about what might be the right thing to use, so that we have a pretty holistic set of comments to give to the graphic designer.
Can I ask you one quick
Sure.
question? Does an applicant get to look at this, at the design review checklist early? Does an applicant get to be aware of the design review checklist early in the process, so they not only have the access to the design manual, but they also know that this is what is going to be the checklist?
So this actually, once we left, so we had done it once in a kind of less robust way, and you guys said that wasn't enough. So we went through and did it again, created this checklist, did it again based on the drawings that you saw at the commission, okay? Gave it to them, said, okay, these are the places where we do not think you're in compliance. They turned around a set of drawings in a day or two, and then I redid it again based on the changes that they've made. So this has gone through a couple of iterations. So, it is our practice that before we issue a staff report, we give it to an applicant for input. They can tell us they hate every condition. That doesn't mean we will change all the conditions. But if it's wording, if it's a misunderstanding, we want to get that worked out. And we also want to give them the opportunity to say, we disagree with you. So that is a part of the process that we went through. Okay. So just as, so the two pieces I'm going to focus on are I think it was section 3 and 4, or 2 and 3 in the briefing response memo that are design manual related. So the first one was, we contacted Crandall Arambula and said, help us understand how decisions are made using this, who gets to decide, what things are required. I think you saw the kind of questions. So, and I assume you've read this, so I'm not going to read the whole thing. This is exactly what was in your memo. So this is no new material, just some highlights. So I think that some of the key pieces were that they considered this a toolkit. They think of it being considered holistically, words and pictures. That we have an objective, and everything is kind of compared back to the objective. That the appropriate list may incorporate one or multiple elements. And I think this is one of the pieces that we're going to have to sort of feel our way through, because as I looked at that, the example I gave them is the one that's on the left, the arts and crafts roof, because it's clear that asphalt shingles, wood shingles, and slate or concrete tile, you're going to pick one of those. We wouldn't want a hodgepodge of multiple roof materials. On the other hand, when you look at the doors, sometimes they're very specific for retail, if you use brick. So that's pretty clear. But then there are other things where it's not clear. At least initially it's not clear. And I guess the way I read both their response, it's almost like a performance standard in that, taking Northwest Lodge, for example, it says a sense of grand entry and arrival. So as they pointed out, if you only did natural wood, which is this one here, that wouldn't be enough to create a sense of grand entry. They're not saying it's 2 from column A and 3 from column B. They're saying if you pick some of these, you may have to do multiples to get to grand entry. If you pick other ones, like maybe if you're doing really, a large door and substantive hardware, maybe that's enough just doing those. And so this is going to be a performance standard where we have to then look at the elements they've picked and compare that back to the guideline to determine if they have met that expectation. Does that make sense? Okay. That's great, because it's hard. So I think the two things that the memo asked the commission to give us some feedback on, one, both were related to massing. The first one was complex roofs. So there are a series of terms. It says more complex roof forms, and then they give 3 different terms of that could contribute to achieving that. So the changes that were made, all roofs were made steep, consistent with the definition in the adopted standard, because they actually put in pitches. Second, they reduced all of the pitches to a single pitch, again, consistent with the style. Third, they changed the roof on all the stair towers, so there are no more shed roofs. They are now gable, which is, again, consistent with the style. But the outstanding question is, does it meet the idea of complex roof forms? So there's no definition of what complex is. So I think that what the 2 things, sort of 2 big categories of sources that we have to evaluate that, one are the phrases that I've provided here, and second is the photos that are provided for arts and crafts. And then depending on your response, we will sort of decide where we go from here. Thoughts? Okay. I get your, I hear what you're saying. So I will keep going with what's in the memo, and then we'll talk about it later. Sorry, got lost. So if the commission feels that the roof is not complex enough, staff proposed one option in a sort of piecemeal, my great graphic skills in Word. And so one option was to make the roof and the whole stair tower more prominent to create an intersecting ridge, which was one of the elements that's identified. And so I sort of pieced together a higher ridge and what it might look like from the front. So that, and do not, if you like the idea and you think this looks lousy, don't hold that against the idea. And the other one that was identified was dormers. So those are 2 tools. There may be other ones that you would identify from the terms. That's the 2 staff thought of. The other element that came up under massing was asymmetry. And what arts and crafts, the term that's used is asymmetrical composition in both elevation and volume. So in volume, you can sort of see the footprints here. And this wing is actually about 6 feet wider than this wing. And, you know, it's slightly at an angle and they're offset. So overall, volumetrically, it's relatively asymmetrical. But we're also talking about an elevation. And as you may remember, the two facades are very similar. They're symmetrical. And so, again, no definition of asymmetry. There are photos provided. The photos have varying levels of asymmetry. They demonstrate various levels of asymmetry. And so the question becomes, how might you make them more asymmetrical? And so one idea was to not use, and this was actually Commissioner Price's, I remembered from last week, saying that, you know, we're using the same windows in the same pattern in both wings. So I just mocked up something. I'm not saying that this is necessarily the right collection of windows, but that it would make it less symmetrical. And it would also be a good reflection of the difference in the sort of workspaces behind that facade, because if you look at, blow up this sort of end of the plan, you can see that this wing has 3 workspaces. This one has 2, and one of them has its long dimensional across the face. So that the way it was, the windows were done sort of belied that actual configuration. And then the last thing, as just opportunities for consideration, was some changes to material. For instance, the brick that is used in both bases is the same, and so that potentially you could use somewhat different brick patterns in each wing to just further enhance that distinction, and it would implement one of the appropriate items for arts and crafts, which is the phrase that's down here at the bottom, decorative brick pattern details. Okay, of that part of the memo. So now, I'm really like on the edge of my technology knowledge here.
Doing real good.
So I have the blank ones on the left, and I won't go through that, but I'm going to leave this up here for now. So what I have done is, as I mentioned, gone through here and evaluated it. I think there's not much that I would add relative to massing, because I think we've already talked about compliance or lack of compliance on a couple of items, or maybe not lack of compliance, but where we wanted commission input, which was both around the complex room forms and asymmetry. So we had proposed some possible conditions if the commissioners considered that needed further enhancement. In terms of scale, the building from staff's assessment complied with the elements that were identified. Materials, again, the materials that have been selected in terms of brick, I tried to underline some of these just as a way of identifying how staff thought about this. Brick, woodlap siding, and board and batten. It is not natural board and batten, but it is board and batten. Windows, the sort of basic character, the scale of the windows, the use of lintels or sills down at the ground level where the brick is being applied, all of that complies. doors, the residential, so they complied with many or all of the elements that were identified except for the one associated with residential, which seemed appropriate to staff. And again, the roof material that was selected, the asphalt shingles, were consistent with the specifications. And colors met the palette, and one of the elements in the description is that if you are using brick, that it would be warm tans and browns. Then moving into the urban design section, the map was labeled as, to be refined in the July 20th draft. And so based on the element, so the elements, I guess the potential elements in the area had not been defined. Some natural elements that are present, such as the ditch and the wetland, are probably not within the ditch has not been identified as a stream. And the wetland was far enough away and on the other side of the building, it didn't seem to staff that that would then trigger compliance. And because the terms hadn't been defined, it seemed like that was premature to apply those elements to the building. Harmony, buildings were expected to harmonize, and based on the terms in the July 20th draft, we felt that it complied, but we also provided the draft that went forward for adoption because we thought that had better clarity than the July 20th draft. We're not suggesting mixing, but we just thought that that provided some additional information that might be useful for the commissioner's review. Block size, because of the elements that surround the property, we felt that there was not an ability to break the block up because we couldn't cross I-90, and we were already connecting into the King County Trail, and we did not feel that we could do other or additional King County connections. So we identified that as NA. Parking structures, again, most of it is under building. So many of the elements under the parking structures were identified as not applicable because this was more surface parking, but there were a couple, and they did comply with those. Enclosure, again, complied, primarily because it's 4 stories and less. Setbacks, the building is set back. We indicated compliance partly because an AAS had administrative adjustment of standards had been approved as part of the original ASDP, which was really to address that the property line is set so far back from Gilman, and it has only an 80-foot frontage, that it really was not possible to get the building within 10 feet of that property line, and even if you did, it would still feel very far set back from Gilman. So that was staff's perspective on that. The setbacks from natural areas, again, because of our previous evaluation, we felt that this did not apply. Ground floor entries for both retail and commercial mostly complied, except that the design manual only allows doors to face parking if they are used for service, employees, or emergency. And it was not clear that this door was restricted to those uses, so we proposed a condition to limit the use of that door. Same with the ground floor commercial. There were doors on either side of this space that faced the parking lot. Because they have proposed using this area just north of this area as they're loading, it did seem appropriate to have a service door. I'm not sure that they needed both those service doors. Transparency from a retail perspective complied, except for the east wing, the west facade of the east wing did not have enough windows. They partly because there was a planter bed there, so they had proposed a window that the windows ended at the edge of the planting bed rather than extending past it to meet the percentage for the whole facade. Commercial complied with the transparency requirements. Weather protection did not quite comply. The entries were recessed, but the weather protection standards in the Central Issaquah standards still apply in conjunction with the design manual. And so they really needed to add weather protection at each of the entries into each retail space and/or the commercial space to meet the 75% that's required in the design manual. And lastly, the forecourts and courtyards were evaluated by staff as complying. So, as I understand it, and please correct me if I'm wrong, we would move to Dan's presentation on the rest of the briefing response memo, then the applicant's response, and then public comment.
I like that idea.
Okay,
Makes sense.
let's do that. Good job, Lucy, or Ms. Swillman, thank you.
Well, at the end of the evening, we'll discuss whether we're going to do it that way again or not.
Good evening, commissioners and members of the public. My name is Dan Martinez. I'm an assistant planner with the Development Services Department. The first meeting that we had regarding this permit was on April 4th, and we focused largely on the presentation of the details of the requested site development permit. Today's meeting is really intended to focus on the portions of the briefing response memo that hopefully answer some of the concerns and questions raised at the last meeting, and this includes the plaza design for both plazas, as well as how the trail would work. As a brief summary, the request is for a 4-story mixed-use building measuring 47,043 square feet. 2,500 square feet of ground floor retail would be provided, and 3 stories of individually leased workspace lofts would be constructed, 2nd, 3rd, and 4th floor. The first topic in the briefing response memo relates to procedures and how those are being followed. One of the requests and one of the concerns that we've heard from the public has been that the traffic signal and pedestrian improvements should be part of the discussion here at the Development Commission hearing. Staff agrees that the Development Commission must weigh the design and technical land use elements of a project when they're considering making a decision. However, the initial design of that pedestrian crossing was already approved by the City Council as part of the development agreement in May of 2017. In addition to that, we agree that it would be ideal to have that conversation and to have phases 1 and 2 of that design occur concurrently. However, that's not the case. The first phase of the project requires that, of these pedestrian and signal improvements, requires that the developer construct the signal on addressing the north side of Gilman only, and that the Northwest Juniper Street and Rainier Boulevard intersection would be left as a phase 2. And that's something that, that the city would be responsible for. There was also a question raised about whether we could implement the district visions as part of this project. The district visions have not been adopted by the City Council yet. They are going to Land and Shore Committee tomorrow, and hopefully they'll be referred back to the City Council for approval. With regards to some of the issues raised for the building design as they pertain to the development design standards, Lucy covered the design manual portion. These concerns are just meant to address those items specifically within the development and design standards. There was a concern raised that this sidewalk here was too narrow. The applicant's team did revise that from 3 feet to 4 feet. However, we're still looking to get 5 feet on that sidewalk, so we've included a new condition that the project plans will be revised to accommodate a 5-foot clear walkway. There was also a concern expressed about the garage lights being seen from Gilman Boulevard and from Pagacha. The applicant has made some revisions to that to screen that lighting, but in order to ensure that it carries through to the construction permits, we've added a condition that garage lighting will be reviewed or that screening will be reviewed with the building permits. There was also a concern raised regarding the primary entries, which are Section 14.4 of the Central Issaquah Development Design Standards outlines the requirements for those. The applicant has made some revisions to that. And staff believes that those revisions adequately address the requirements of the development and design standards. However, weather protection is still an area of concern for staff, so we are including a condition. It was condition 31, which Lucy touched on in the design manual. better screening from Pagacha. The screening requirements for parking facilities are identified in section 15.3. The applicant is providing a 6-foot tall steel lattice with plants growing up the lattice. This complies with the development design standards, so we're not including any conditions there. There was a request for a drawing representing the view from the Pagacha site. The applicant has provided this drawing here, which is a street view photograph with a simulated building. And then through block passage, which Lucy touched on in the design manual portion, I believe that, so there isn't an opportunity for through block passage going towards I-90, but I believe that the concern may be through block passage in this area here, directly going into Pagacha. At the time, currently it would go into their parking lot. So staff believes that the best time to address that is if and when Pagacha decides to redevelop. So one of the concerns that had been raised was that there needed to be more public involvement and more stakeholder involvement in the design of the trail plazas and how they would interface with the East Lake Sammamish Trail. So we did hold a stakeholder meeting, bless you.
Thank you.
On Tuesday, April 17th, shortly after the first Development Commission hearing. We invited King County staff, the Cascade Bicycle Club. Neither one of them were able to attend, but they did provide some comments to us. And a representative from the Mountains to Sound Greenway Trust was present, a representative from the Issaquah Alps Trail was also present, and then there were multiple departments within the city that were present, including Public Works Engineering, the Parks Department, Development Services Department as well. Incidentally, even though the request and the invitation was to discuss the Trail Plaza design, a lot of what the focus of the meeting turned to was the design of the actual trail and how that interfaces with both Gilman and with the plazas. Some of the issues or some of the suggestions that were identified, and this was a comment by King County, was that this ditch here would need to be filled in order to comply with ADA. There was also a suggestion that visual cues and rumble strips be provided to slow down bicyclists as they are coming down the East Lake Sammamish Trail towards Gilman. This hopefully helps avert any issues with both the traffic on Gilman and with any pedestrians that are located using the plazas in front of the building. A bicycle service station was recommended, and what that looks like, and it would be something like this, where you have a rack to put the bicycle on, you have air, and then you have tools. So let's see. Another very useful suggestion was to pull the this trailside plaza back a little bit, further from the intersection and further from the, so that it wouldn't obstruct any sight lines for trail users. And lastly, we discussed having the design of this weather protection here match the design of this the existing storage building. We also discussed the design of the intersection. Again, recognizing that it's a two-phase deal. One of the concerns was that we didn't want the trail itself to feel like it just kind of ends there. You know, parks and city staff in general really want to ensure that that East Lake Sammamish Trail continues to Juniper and to Rainier. So we've discussed visual cues and signage that would encourage trail users to continue on their journey. So the result of that meeting has been incorporated into the applicant's newest drawings. We have the bicycle service station here, along with some bicycle racks. The seating would now be a curved bench, and this trellis, instead of being 3 separate ones, it would be one larger trellis, and the top would be designed again to match that of the existing storage building. The 10-foot wide race crosswalk has also been added by the applicant in this section here, and that would include colored concrete. And the concrete here would also be designed to be distinctive. One kind of curveball that was thrown at us was that we initially met with King County Park staff to discuss that access easement, so the ability to both use that easement to construct the signal and to construct the trailside plaza, because that would be built on county land. King County later identified that unless the city enters into agreement with them for maintenance of the trail plaza, that they wouldn't be willing to support it. So it is a requirement of the development agreement was for this trailside plaza to be built. So currently, we did meet with the mayor, and we are meeting with King County next week on Monday. We can try to locate the plaza in terms of options. We can try to locate it on site. However, the site would be pretty constrained. The plaza itself would also be substantially decreased. We could locate the plaza in another nearby location, which meets the intent of the development agreement. That location hasn't been identified by staff or the applicant yet. We can potentially abandon the plaza idea altogether, or essentially some other unknown option, in which case we would come back to update the Development Commission on what that would look like. The intent would be to move forward, accepting that this is an unknown at this time, but that staff would be coming back to update the commission on what the outcome of that was. So a lot of the comments pertaining to the building plaza were that it felt stark or uninviting. There was also a concern about the community board, folks not really knowing what it was or what its purpose was. So the applicant has revised that design to include a water fountain and initially they included some red benches as seating. They've now gone to a more natural wood for seating, and the community board has now been changed to the bicycle locker that we had previously discussed. So the bicycle locker would now be located here. There was also a question about what other cities have done, what kind of parking has been assigned. The short answer to that, the applicant's transportation consultant did provide a memo, which is included as an exhibit, but the short answer is that both the city of Seattle and Renton don't have a prescribed parking rate for studio lofts, that they are reviewed on a case-by-case basis. And then there was also a request for a tabulation of what the parking requirements and the amount of parking being provided for both the lofts and the existing storage building. The parking required amounts to 65 spaces, and the parking provided amounts to 81. There were concerns about the number of bicycle parking spaces, the number of motorcycle parking spaces, and the lack of a bicycle locker in the last submittal. However, with their most recent submittal, the applicant has addressed all of those issues. The bicycle parking is being provided in excess. The site requires 6 spaces and 12 are being provided. The motorcycle parking has also been addressed with 2 spaces being provided here, and the bicycle locker again is being provided here. So staff recommends the removal of conditions 10, 11, and 12. However, we are recommending a new condition for the loading spaces. The site requires 2, but only 1 is being provided at this time. The applicant has expressed that he would like to have a shared parking with the storage facility. However, staff hasn't been able to analyze what that would look like, so this condition is added in order to ensure that we buy off on that. Again, intersection safety. It's been discussed, and we are going to continue to discuss that on an ongoing basis. Again, we're meeting with King County on Monday in terms of traffic light synchronization. That will be that's expected to be synchronized with the city's existing traffic signal network. For trees, there was some concern that trees should be planted on-site and not off-site, that cottonwood trees should not be used, and that the water line easement should be moved to accommodate trees. Currently, as I mentioned at our last meeting, there are some constraints with where trees can be planted on the site. The site was essentially cleared as part of the ASDP. That was allowed as part of the ASDP. So there is not a lot of opportunity for retention at this point. in terms of planning on-site and or off-site, the development design standards do allow for that. The applicant has indicated that no cottonwood trees would be used. The water line easement, that is, staff currently recommends maintaining that in order to allow the developer an option to expand in the future. The 5 feet of, if the water line easement were to be moved, there wouldn't be a lot of space for tree planting along this edge here. We've sought opportunities through King County land and through WashDOT right-of-way to plant trees, and they have both declined that opportunity. There are conditions already as part of the staff report for staff to continue to work with the applicant on providing trees on-site, and if not possible, then trees off-site, or to pay into the city tree fund. And then lastly, there were concerns about the bus stop. Currently, this red star signifies the current bus stop, which is here. We have communicated with King County, and we'd be looking at relocating this bus stop somewhere closer to the site. And I put the marker here, but I believe the applicant is in a better position to discuss where that would go. And that is all, so I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to the applicant.
It's loaded on the computer. Okay. Okay. I will. Okay, will do. Hello, can you hear me? My name is Lara Barnes, and I'm with Jackson, Maine Architecture. So from the last Development Commission meeting on April 4th, we have been diligently working towards providing an architectural solution to meet the concerns presented at the meeting. The design concerns that we heard from the commissioners and the public at that meeting is as follows. Both the Trail Connection Plaza and the Building Plaza needed more development. There was also discussion on whether the project is urban grange or arts and crafts, and we decided it's arts and crafts, but there needed to be some adjustments to the design to make it more arts and crafts-like. That included arched entryways, recessed entryways, some more development on the elevator stair shafts, 2 or 3 window pairings, not 4, and the removal of 1 wood facade texture. Other design concerns discussed included the garage lighting and what the driver would see driving on Northwest Gilman, and more stair and elevator tower development. So the Trail Plaza. On the right here is the old design, or the design from the previous commission meeting, and this is the proposed new design. The stakeholder meeting was held, as Dan mentioned, on April 17th, and comments and concerns were heard and applied to the new design. Moving the plaza further away from the intersection, as shown here, provided more safety for trail users, as well as to act as a reminder to the trail users, or a caution that they're entering a developed area. A bicycle pump repair station was a suggested amenity and was added, and the previous design appeared to be too generic and did not relate back to the building as much as commissioners and public wanted. So that was redesigned and relates more back to the design of the building. building plaza design, we added an enhanced raised crosswalk, as Dan mentioned. The new building plaza design provides more detail with a greater connection on the pedestrian experience. So again, this is the previous design and this is the new design. A low gravel stream with benches and stepping stones provides a more interactive pedestrian experience with the water feature, as shown here. Curving walkways and benches, enhanced pavement, and a larger landscape planter, as you can see here, got a bit bigger, are elements that were used to soften the space. As for the building design and how it relates to arts and crafts, arched, this is the previous south front building facade, and this is the new presented south facade. Arched recessed entries with contrasting lintels, as shown here, have been added to the main retail and loft entries. Window pairings have been adjusted. So previously there was window pairings or groupings of 4 windows, which was a comment from the commissioners, so it has been removed. The shake wood texture previously shown has been removed. So now there's only 2 wood textures. And the design now provides a consistent roof pitch of 8 to 12, which is considered steep per the design manual. Whereas in the previous design, the steep roof was only provided at the front and the rear elevations. So you can see these 2 slopes are both 8 to 12. The stair and elevator towers were also a topic of discussion. So these are the towers that were presented previously, and these are the towers that are now being presented. They were previously shown with a Rookwood blue-green siding treatment, and it was commented that that made the towers stand out too much. So they are now shown with a cream color wood treatment to match the building. Windows have been added to the stair tower here as requested. And the roofs over the elevator and stair towers previously shown here was at a shallow slope and was a shed roof, and now has been adjusted to be a gable roof and at a steep slope. We have also added a chimney-like element to the elevator tower to add to the arts and crafts design styles, and that's an element that is mentioned in the manual. We believe that these steep roofs and gabled roofs adds complexity to the project's roof that was previously not had. And so these past 2 elevator shaft and south elevation relate back to the conditions 26 and 27 concerning massing and asymmetry and symmetry. We believe that the proposed design has addressed concerns of complexity of roof forms with the addition of the 2 gabled roofs at the elevator and stair towers. So, and then also with condition 27, I think it's better seen from the elevation. Oops. We don't believe that the building is symmetrical in plan, as Lucy has agreed with and mentioned before. The shift in plan adds asymmetry, and in elevation, the 2 faces are not symmetrical, as the west wing is 7 feet wider than the east. So this wing here is 7 feet wider. And a brick chimney element has been added to the west wing, and we believe that that adds a quality of asymmetry. Although we don't believe the design is symmetrical, we believe the new design has proposed solutions for roof complexity requirements, but we are willing to work with Dan and Lucy to make further adjustments if the commissioners feel that they're needed. And this is an image pulled from the design manual that I think related back to our proposed design. As Dan mentioned, we provided a perspective view from the Pogacha entry on Northwest Gilman of the building. Just to note, the proposed building does sit 100 feet back from Northwest Gilman, and the distance along with existing trees limits the view of the building from those driving by. And this here is the outline of the roof. Here we have the east facade, both old and new. So that being said, the siding has been pulled down 3 feet on the proposed design to limit the amount of light that would leave the site from garage lighting. We are confident that those driving by the site will not be affected by the lights, but we will move forward with caution, and we will continue to work with Dan and Lucy on meeting the lighting requirements as noted in condition 33. So this plan is just calling out a few of the other conditions that Dan already went over. So condition 28, the entry here at the retail entry facing the parking, and then condition 29, entry for commercial facing parking. We agree, and those entries or doors will be constricted to service, employee, and or emergency use. And as you can see, the doors here are located next to the loading stall and will provide service and loading use. And then condition 30 speaks to the transparency of this face here. And as Lucy mentioned, we did calculate it a bit different than she had because of the raised planter. But we will abide by the percentage and add more width to that storefront. And then condition 32, the 4-foot clear, we will also abide by that condition and push the elevator in 1 additional foot to allow for that 5-foot clearance. And this is the last one here. Also, you heard Lucy and Dan mention that the entries did not comply with the weather protection requirements in the SIDS. And we had thought that recessing the doors 3 feet would provide a weather-protected entry, but per the requirements, we need 6 feet of protection, and we acknowledge that. And we will make that change. We will add a weather protection element at those entries. And that's all.
So now we sit and hear from the public?
Oh,
We sit and hear from the
and Bob's going to speak now.
My name is Bob Power, and I represent Issaquah Studio Lofts. And I just want to say I think we've had a very collaborative effort with the city staff on trying to get this project to where it is today. As a personal side note, my educational background was in architecture, but I was smart enough to learn that I should probably do something else. But through that, I guess that's why we pay the professionals, and I really think Jackson, Maine has done a really good job here today, and I support what they've done, both on the project aesthetics as well as how we're dealing with the trail and the plaza, and just look for your support. Thank you.
Thank you. Right now, we intend to hear from the public. If anybody wishes to speak, would ask that you sign in and open the microphone to you.
So I'm Connie Marsh. I live up on Squawk, and I brought a sign, so I'll deal with the sign first. This side says Providence Point now, but that's irrespective. So I couldn't find black. Here's I-90. It's the exit ramp. Here's Gilman. Parcel, about 300 feet. The concept of a grid, as I found when I walked with Fish and Wildlife to understand whether it was a ditch or not, or where it started to be a ditch. So I got to walk this sort of great parallel space that was not on Gilman Boulevard, so that you could actually walk on this side of Gilman without having to be in the traffic. And so by starting this project without creating this line, this mid-block crossing that will go, now I-90 curves down here, so you're gonna eventually end up not having a mid-block crossing, is a darn shame, because walking along Gilman isn't pleasant. And to not allow anybody to have an interesting walking experience parallel to Gilman on this side of the road is just simply against everything that we talked about in the Central Issaquah plan. Small grid, walkability, and not having to interface with traffic so much. So when you say, you know, Pagacha, they can deal with figuring out how to get through somebody else's parcel later, doesn't work for me. What you need to do is you need to holistically plan for this grid, looking in the future for 30 years, saying eventually all these parcels will develop. And how do we allow the pedestrians to gracefully and even sometimes with fun go through those parcels? So I entirely disagree with the staff's position in this situation. You might be surprised by that. Now, let's move on to trees. We are Tree City, USA. We have a tree canopy. And the entire time we were saying we could be 85 and 95% impervious surface in the Central Issaquah plan, there was a caveat that, you know, but that's never really going to happen because we have the landscape guidelines and we have a tree retention code and we have a actual minimum tree density. And so in this situation, you also have staff being able to say, you know what? Nah, we can put it into a tree fund and we can plant potentially off-site somewhere. So this brings me back to the frustration that we have all experienced is, when is it feasible? When is it not feasible? How much of a development can you change in order to say, you know, it's just not feasible to plant trees in Tree City, USA? And so me, you know, I'm going to go for the trees because I don't want to live in a, forgive me, Bellevue, because Bellevue actually has a lot of trees. I don't want to live in a hardscape town. Everywhere I go, I want there to be an echo of our green mountains that we can see, which brings me to the plaza, which is hardscape. So why do we have so much hardscape when we cannot find places to plant trees? Very confusing to me because it seems like you could plant trees in places where we have hardscape, which brings me further to the points that were on the slide when we were discussing that community area, when some of the comments were, it isn't the verdant sensibility that we're expecting on the trail entrance. It needs to be a special place, a place where you feel like you have arrived. And this plaza does not feel like a place of arrival to me. It feels like we're sticking in a little bump because we have to. And we do have a bicycle thingy. So what to do with that, because we don't know what the county is going to allow. And you didn't have the public at the table to say what they wanted. All you had is a couple of specialty groups. So I guess what I would do is I would ask for a condition that this be a placeholder that will be designed after the county conversation has been had. And I don't even know if that's possible, but it seems foolish to create something before you can even understand how the trail is going to interface with the rest of Issaquah. And I feel like there was one other thing that made me cranky, but I probably wrote it down anyway. So you already know all this, but this has expression and hand waving. So
And I hope it has signing in.
eventually it will. Can I use this pen?
You can use whatever you want.
Well, this, David Kapler, 255 Southeast Andrews Street. In some ways, this is kind of a learning and introduction to the Central Issaquah Plan, and we'll probably, hopefully, have learned some things here that can be better implemented into the future. I supported the original development agreement on this because it was, we had some issues there of trying to not have to be tearing up streets and curbs and everything later to put in, to coming up with something. We came up with some kind of design to try and make this 5 corners, basically, kind of intersection work. And it seems like we're getting something there. The city saved some money. The developer's putting in quite a bit of money into the signal. So, but not everything's perfect, but we're learning and it's getting better. One of the best improvements was a stakeholder meeting. That did help, and I think the interaction we're seeing with the park department, especially with the planning people, is really a good step forward and completely necessary to be successful in the Central Issaquah Plan. I don't know, there was some deal about building harmony, and was it supposed to be in harmony with the storage building? I didn't see it. Not that I want it to be in harmony with that building, but that was confusing to me. Phase 2 basically is the south side. The city's still working and trying to figure out how to work in the trail there and Rainier and Juniper Streets. But at least we'll have the signals in. We'll have the conduit in a different, and hopefully in a place where it'll work for the future changes the city will be doing to their side of the street. I'd sure like to see some trees besides cottonwoods across the back, and it seems like it would be in their interest, given the back is the I-90, to have something green in that back area. The landscaping, additional landscaping proposed in front of the buildings is a definite improvement and appreciated. Asymmetric on the fronts, not so much, but I'm not sure what, I'm not an architect, so I don't know how I would deal with that exactly. The chimney, are we going to really have bricks up there? I remember in 1964 going to West Seattle after the earthquake, and where my grandparents lived, and all the chimneys in West Seattle fell over in that earthquake. And it was pretty exciting in the second floor of Bellevue High School, but we didn't lose anything at the school. But I don't know, if a chimney, I don't know, whatever, make sure those bricks, if they're going to be up there, are well attached. Thank you.
So seeing nobody else from the public, we'll just close that public comment and open this for discussion.
I'm going to go questions first.
Questions from the commissioners.
Yes. I do have a question.
Great.
Yes. Dan, can you look at, I have a survey plan that shows the property, and then I have all the C's drawing, I think, and the A drawings. And somehow the property line of the survey must be wrong plan, or the A and the C drawings are on the wrong site or something. Because I look at it and we have an existing building, the storage building, and the new building is right smack there.
What sheet are you on, Ray?
I am on the survey sheet, and I'm looking at comparing with C drawing, C.1, and A.1.
So when you say survey, what do you mean?
I have a survey by Encompass, the tax parcel boundary topo plan. I think that's the one that you have there.
Oh, yeah, I see.
Yeah, yeah. So the property line that you have there, yeah, you show an L-shaped building. Is that the storage building that's out there now?
So this building here,
Right.
That's the building that was there a couple of years ago, before phase one of the site started,
Ah, okay. Okay, so
when the
that's,
goats still grazed.
okay, so, all right, so that's not up to date then?
It's an existing, it's the existing context. It was, that's all it was meant to capture.
Okay. So, okay, so, all right. So the new building, it's not even shown on there, all right?
If you look at C1, it's very, very faint,
Mm-hmm.
the new storage building.
Okay, that answers the question then.
'Cause you can't see it on the one that Dan's pulled up.
Yeah, I see,
But
vaguely, I see on mine,
On the
C-
print, it's
Yeah.
slightly visible.
Yeah. But the question that I have then is that, when you look at the fighting engine that comes in and then route around, turn around, yeah, there you go. Is it going into the building, or is it just going around the parking lot?
so the parking there is all under building. So it wouldn't be going through the building, but it would be going under it.
It's going to go under the building.
Under the storage building.
Correct.
Is there underground parking there? Because I think that's a parking there, isn't it? Existing building?
It's covered parking, so it's on the surface, but the building is above it.
Okay, okay, so it's ground level, but it's covered,
Correct.
second floor then? Okay, and the fire folks, fire department looked at it, they want to fight fire from,
Well, that's not part of this project.
correct, but
It's already done.
yeah, but I'm just trying to understand what you're showing me. The fire engine's gonna turn around and then come back, and then
The fire department did look at this, correct.
they will fight fire right there on the face of the building, pretty much.
They've already proved it.
I know, but,
So the answer is yes, they will fight fire on the
right next to
approved
the
route.
building, I mean, yeah. Okay, that's why I'm not a firefighter, but, yeah,
So-
okay, so they go
So
around the
Commissioner
building.
Leong, what I would say is that sometimes the routes that they're showing here are more about exiting
Mm-hmm.
after they've completed the firefighting, rather than the route that they would take during the conflagration. So I think it just shows that they can turn around inside the site. Now, they might choose to back out if they needed to, but they have the ability to turn around on site if they desire to do so.
Okay. Question? On your building, on A drawings, A1, maybe A2 would show it better. Towards the south, yeah, there you go, the entrance. I think I haven't seen the past submittal, but I think the landscaping, the water fountain's probably a good idea to have that. But that's where the loading of the passenger is going to occur. You have main entrances, and you have like 3 main entrances. I wonder which one would they really use? You have 2 that goes into the retail, and then 1 goes into the lobby. So as far as, we'll get into this massing of entrances, and there's no central point of entry. It's all spread out.
Correct, yeah. So again, the principal use is the lofts, and those can be accessed through here, through the lobby entrance.
Yeah, and how would they get there?
How would they get here?
Yeah,
So Gilman Boulevard is over here,
right?
and there is as part of the project,
Right.
the applicant would be looking at installing a traffic signal
Right.
that would allow access from Gilman, both right in and left turns.
Right.
And so you can drive
Right.
using this driveway here, access parking in here,
Okay,
and then you can walk either using this sidewalk or this sidewalk to access the entries of the building. Now, if you're a pedestrian or a bicyclist, you would just access the buildings using this crosswalk here. And again, the lobby front door is there, and then the two retail uses.
I can tend to agree with you on the pedestrian, but the folks driving, do you think they'll go all the way around, park the car, and then come back in to the front to go in?
If they are there specifically for those retail uses, then yes.
Okay. That's fine. And then the other thing is that we have this building, and there's only one elevator. And for studios, you got artists that's bringing down their crafts. It's only one elevator, and the elevator comes down, and how do they get to the retail?
So
Out through the front door and then come back in?
if somebody from using the lofts wanted to go to the retail uses, yes, they can use any of these doors here or the front door to access those retail uses.
They're upstairs,
They are upstairs.
yeah, and they use the elevator, bring them down.
They can use the elevator or they can use stairs.
I can bet, I'll be willing to bet they're not gonna use the stairs. It's crafts that they carry, they don't want.
So they're
anyway, the point is that they come out to the lobby. How do they get to the retail?
using any of the doors here.
And do they get to
The
retail?
Worklofts are intended to be, I believe that there may be some artists that use them, but what these really are small offices for startup businesses. It's really, the hope is for this facility to be an incubator for small businesses.
I just think something needs to, the applicant probably need to relook at that, because, the circulation is just not working. You got to go out to come back in, and it's just so easy to put a door in there to get to the retail.
So the central Issaquah development and design standards do require that these primary entrances be located facing the street. So these comply with the design and development standards. And in terms of anybody using the second, third, and fourth story lofts, yes, they would use the stairs, assuming that they don't have, a lot of things to carry. They can use the elevator, and yes, they can access the outside through any of these doors, and if they are looking to use the retail, then they would go through the front door like anyone else.
The applicant just need to look, I'm just proposing that the applicant needs to look at the circulation in there. You got 4-story, and then you have only one elevator. Okay. And then you got to go through the outside to come back in. So I'll leave it at that. Will it come back to me, Mr. Chairman?
Sure.
Okay.
Well, why don't you ask if you have other questions?
Yeah, I have a few more questions. On your parking, there's S, there's C, there's M. But I suspect C is probably compact cars?
Compact.
How about S?
Standard.
Standard?
Correct.
How about M?
Motorcycle.
Oh, okay. So, yeah, it'd be nice to have a table. How about L?
Loading.
Ah, okay. Okay. We have loading at the main entrance. That's the only way to get in and out of the,
So the primary entrances are again, at the front facing Gilman. And the loading stall is located essentially behind the building. So they would, to access the lofts site, they could use this door here or this door here.
Commissioner Leong, do you mean in terms of how to access the parking?
I just realized there's a couple more access on the
Right,
west side.
towards I-90,
Yeah.
there is another, so that if someone was loading, there would still be the ability to circulate in and out.
That's good. I don't see any mailroom?
So there is a,
Mailroom in there?
I think it's not labeled, it's the white area sort of between the front door and the electrical.
that's correct,
Uh-huh.
right here. Yeah.
There.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's all the question that I have right now.
Other questions from commissioners?
Mr. Chairman, I have a few. Try to click through them expeditiously here. Regarding the parking screening, the trellis lattice area, what kind of planning do we have going up that? Is that ivy? Do we have a seasonal issue with that? How is that going to work?
I'm going to turn this one over to the applicant.
I'm Greg Persich with Jackson Maine Architecture, and I probably can't answer that question because we have a landscape architect, and what was submitted with the plannings. I'm not sure we'll work with the city on something that'll be evergreen, I guess, or year
The issue would be just so we're not seasonal, so that we
Yeah.
have a screening there.
That'll be
And
intent.
is that same screening going to be on, I guess it's the west side of the west facade? There's a little space there that faces the storage building. Is that same screening going to be used
That's
there?
a wall, right? Yeah, that's a wall on that side. That one's actually directly under the building, so it became more of a wall. This one's out from the building by about 3 or
Okay,
4
so
feet.
that parking isn't exposed on that side of the west building facing the storage building?
It does not appear so from the plans. I'm
Yeah.
looking at sheet L1, if you
Yeah, I
happen to
couldn't
have-
tell. There were a couple of them there. I wasn't sure.
Yeah, it's hard to know what some of the lines are.
Okay, fine. Signage, do we have any information on signage? I think it was mentioned a little in the last presentation that some detail would be forthcoming on that. I think there was a decorative band of concrete mentioned at one time in the plans. Do we have any, I think signage was mentioned tonight in terms of the stakeholder meeting, trail signage and things like that, but I wondered if we had any other detail on signage.
Not at this time, no.
It would, the signage would come after the construction of the building, and they would be required to submit sign permit applications, and they would be required to comply with the current sign standards at that time.
Okay, would we have an opportunity to review that, or is that a staff decision primarily at that point?
Sign permits are a staff decision. Even, I don't believe they'll be requesting any deviations from that.
Okay. Is there another bus stop besides the one we saw there? Isn't there one right in front of Issaquah Auto Stop that's maybe a little bit closer to this than the one in front of Gilman Station?
I'm going to try Google
There's one at
Maps.
the tire shop
Yes.
and one at the Gilman station.
So there's the one we're speaking of.
Yeah.
Here's the site, and you're correct, here's another one down here.
Right, so it kind of falls in between those two. Right?
Well, I think what Metro has communicated is that they would not add one, but they would consider relocating it, which is consistent. What Dan mentioned is they want to go through a signal before they have a stop, so they wouldn't want to, since the new signal is going to be approximately here, they wouldn't want to move the stop right in front of the building because they wouldn't be able to clear the intersection. So, but they sound like they're willing to move it closer to the building.
Okay. Okay, good. Let me see. Okay, so I think the original design of this building, we've been through a couple of iterations with this, right? We were Urban Grange, and now we're Arts and Crafts and so on. And I think your original conception may have been more consistent with the storage building in terms of style. So we've diverged a bit from that. So I wonder what elements of harmony you see now with the existing Arts and Crafts, picking up on a comment from the public, with the storage building. What are going to be the harmonious elements that you see between this building and the storage building that already exists?
Again, Bob Power. When we went through the development agreement, originally the storage building would have had a much different color palette than it has today. It was originally reds that were consistent. The manager of that facility is called Premier Storage, and they have a color palette that they go with. So the best we could do, we really couldn't modify anything structurally on the, or physically on the storage building by the time we got the information back from the city on what the new design guidelines were going to be. So what we were able to do was convince the manager, the operator of the storage facility, to change the color palette of the storage building to be more consistent with the color palette that's now being developed as part of the new Central Issaquah design standards. So it's not so much what's been done to the studio lofts to integrate that back with the storage building, but what we could catch on the storage building at the last moment to kind of integrate the color palette between the two of them.
Are they approximately the same height as well, those two buildings?
The studio loft will be slightly taller because of the higher pitched roofs, but the floor elevations will be pretty consistent.
Okay, I think just one or two more. The stair tower, so on the west facade, there was the chimney that's proposed there. I was wondering how we feel about that addition versus, let's say, staff's option for the taller tower with a prominent intersecting ridge on page 16.
So I would propose that maybe we discuss that as we go through the massing and weigh your different options. I think that's a great discussion point. I don't know that we have an answer right now.
Well, we'd
Okay,
probably
fine.
come to a consensus of that.
Okay, fine. And just quickly, my last one, weather protection is going to go over the doors. What is that going to look like?
It's going to be consistent. This is Lara again. It's going to be consistent with the other canopies shown. Can bring it, the PDF.
Okay, so flat like the other canopy, not
Yeah.
arched? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, okay.
But a bit higher up in order to show that lintel piece.
Right. The contrasting lintel that you're adding?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, thanks. That's all I have.
Commissioner Harrison?
I have two questions. The water feature, I understand, is also going to have a water fountain for dogs? Is that what I heard?
No, that was a suggestion from, I believe it was from you.
No, well, okay. I wasn't thinking of, as dog-oriented as I am, I was thinking of bikers and people on the trail. And what I suggested was that if they're going to have a water feature there, that since there's no water available to people using the trail between here and Redmond, as far as last time I did it, that it would be a good thing to have a water fountain somewhere in this plaza complex. And so what I see now is that there's not going to be a water fountain even for dogs, but there is going to be a bicycle repair station put in, which is going to require infrastructure and ditches and things like that. I mean, to do it, they'll be sealed. So it's a small point. If there's not going to be any water fountain, there's not going to be any water fountain, but the bike repair station is okay.
Right, but there's no dry utilities or air or any service to the bike repair station.
Oh, it doesn't have air?
So it's
has
a
a
pump.
Oh, a pump, okay, fine. More need for water then. Okay. The member of the public did make a suggestion to hold the design for this until there's some clarification of the status with King County. What do you think of that?
Well, I think what we would recommend, because we don't know what it would take to do the Trail Plaza, is that if they proceed with the Trail Plaza that they've shown, that, we wouldn't come back. And I think the building, I guess what I'm saying, not very well, is that the building is separate from the Trail Plaza. So if they proceed, I think they could proceed with the building, and if they proceed with the Trail Plaza that's shown, then we wouldn't come back to the commission. If they proceed with a different plaza to substitute because terms can't be reached with King County, then that's why we proposed some of the other options that we could identify, because Commissioner Brennan had asked us that question. We didn't have much of an answer last time, so we thought we should think about that. And so if there is input on those other options, it would be great to get it from the commissioners this evening. And so that helps guide staff if we are not able to reach terms, and we would come back and have a further discussion with the commission.
Okay. And one observation to follow up on a question from my fellow commissioner is that the illustration, figure 6, that there's the parking structure and surface parking screening from Pagacha. I'd just like to point out that those are deciduous trees there. So if that's an example of how effective the screening is going to be, it's going to be effective for 6 months of the year. And not for 6 months of the year. So I'm not sure that's a 365-day effective.
I think the intent of figure 6, I'll look to my honorable colleague here. I think that the intent of this was to show what the image would be, not to say that the trees were necessarily performing the screening. I think I had understood that the Pagacha screening was really from their parking lot, which...
Yeah, it is. I mean, that has been specifically stated. I understand that, but, all right, that's fine.
Okay,
No need to belabor it.
okay.
Other commissioners' comments? Other commissioners' questions? Thank you.
I've got a couple questions. Dan, I'm trying to understand, on page 81 or page 64 of 179, on the staff comments, the calculations of the weather protection, the first paragraph I'm trying to understand. It says facade is 44 feet long, which requires 33 feet of weather protection, 31.8 required. So I'm trying to figure out, is that 31.8's provided? Or does it requires 31, then 32
I
required?
hate it when you read what I write.
The typo.
Yeah, I think that's exactly correct. My apologies.
But that's why it needs a little bit more,
Right.
so not too much.
Yes,
Okay.
thank you.
And then the paragraph below, it says facade is 32.8 and 20 feet is provided, but I didn't see how much is required. To figure out. Down below, it says the amount provided addresses the need. Anyway,
Oh, I think that the way, thank you. So this is east wing, west facade that you're asking
Right,
about?
right, yeah.
So I think that my coded message here is that it starts with complies.
so 20 feet is enough.
So 20 feet is enough.
Gotcha, okay.
I didn't provide the number, but I understand that might have been a useful piece of information.
Great. And then I wonder if, I'd like to look at the materials and colors again. And so I wonder if we could pull up sheet A 3.0, and then maybe we could look at the board at the same time, and maybe even have it, if you don't mind, if you can sort of hold that for everybody to look at the same time, but if you can pull up A 3.0, and then I thought, the architect could actually explain to us each section of the building what we're going to see, if that's okay?
I'm sorry, which one were you asking for? A
A
what?
3.0,
That,
yeah.
okay, let me make it just a little bigger.
Really, it's the top portions, the,
Green color.
Oh, there's colored ones?
Green color. and-
but this is good because it shows all the different parts
Okay.
for understanding, and then we can, hopefully, thinking we can visualize by looking at this, and then,
So this is Lara from Jackson, Maine. The base is brick, which is shown on the board.
Art.
that's
The
the
dark,
raven, that's
that's the raven.
essentially black, okay? And is that the same for the bike storage in the
yes.
middle? Okay.
Same here. And then the siding in the center of the building is the rookwood blue-green color. There's a color swatch on the right there, the green. That's the color. And the texture is the board and batten. And then the front of the building on both wings is the cream color, which also has a color swatch next to the green.
The center one there, okay. And that's a lap siding and then the board and batten above?
Yes,
Okay.
exactly. I don't know if, are there any other
Okay.
The
materials you want?
windows.
What was that? Where is that one? Oh, sorry. The relaxed khaki is the cream color. The metal samples on the side are the existing storage colors that were used that we're trying to match.
So these are the storage buildings colors,
Okay,
and then these are the loft buildings.
okay. And so the center color, that center white cream color, that's there, that one is, that's the facade?
Let me see.
Or is
Oh.
that
Trim
trim?
in the wall.
That's trim.
That's the trim?
That's the trim.
And the one to the
Sorry.
left of that is a facade?
Yes, yes.
Okay, a dark cream? Yeah,
The dark green is in the center, yeah.
yeah.
And the glass, is that the window color
Yeah, the storefront glass
with the frame,
with the bronze.
bronze frame?
Right. And then the upper right corner, is that the look of the roof cover? Great.
And the, right at the bottom, the crosshatch, what is that?
It's meant to represent the steel lattice.
Hey, Dan.
Right here, this,
It's meant to represent the steel lattice.
That's good for me. Well, should we tell our guests what they win? So. Thank you, Dan. Thank you.
sure.
No question.
Other questions? So how about comments?
Do you want to go through the, do you want to go through, say, Lucy's portions first, that checklist, or through the design questions or the development questions? Do you have a preference?
Go through the comments first.
Well, we've got two things between Lucy's design standards and then Dan's development standards and answers to those.
Right.
And I thought it might be good to separate those out.
Right.
So let's do the design standards first.
Lucy's?
Yep.
Okay.
Okay.
So, on the right is staff's filled out one, on the left is the blank one for the commissioners.
Well, I'll jump in if you want. I've got two comments here, and I think it would be, I'll work backwards, because the first, for me, the first one would be the asymmetrical. And actually, I feel like the design guidelines, in my mind, are misleading, because it talks about one of the appropriate things is asymmetrical, but then when I look at the top picture and I think, that doesn't seem asymmetrical. I know it's got a little bit of a different roof line there. The roof covers, where other protection down below are slightly different, but in general, the building seems kind of symmetrical to me. The middle building looks kind of symmetrical to me. I guess the bottom one maybe is a little asymmetrical, but I guess I don't feel like there's a big push to say the building has to be super asymmetrical given what the photos are. And I would view this maybe as asymmetrical being an appropriate but not necessary. So I'm okay with the symmetry or the way the buildings have been designed. I think with the setback of the frontage and the turn of them a bit, I'm okay with the buildings. But I think it's partly because I don't know that they're great. The conflict for me between the photos and the asymmetry don't match. So I don't know what other commissioners think.
I agree. I think these pictures speak loudly, and this is what we've given them to design from, and I think they've done a good job of matching that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I would agree that, I think they try to make it symmetrical, but then if you look at the plan, then you go into something where it's a parking lot. And that's where I guess I have a little bit of a problem. But if if you say, is it symmetrical? Yeah, I guess they tried and they succeeded in doing that. But the whole gist of the symmetrical symmetry is that you have two elements, and then that's the main entry of the building, and that's what it is. But if you look at the floor plan, it just goes into somewhere where it there's nothing in there. If you look at A 2.0, it just goes into something. I think it goes into a loading parking lot, whereas the main element of the building is to get you up to maybe the studios up there, or maybe a retail store. So to answer, if it's a legal lawyer that would ask you, is that symmetrical? Yes, I would say it is. But is it serves the function? I would say no, it does not.
Commissioner, I'm confused. Are you saying that you think that this standard calls for symmetry as opposed to asymmetry?
It's,
No, I mean, we're talking about the design standards that
Correct.
we're using here.
yeah, I think it is.
Is what?
It is symmetrical.
The point is that the design standard calls it for it to be asymmetrical.
Asymmetrical.
And have they accomplished that in any way?
Right.
But,
Yes or no?
but the example,
The example, we're not talking about the example. The example is pretty symmetric. What we're talking about is the design as proposed.
Would it be helpful if I put the elevation back up? No.
Sure.
Yeah, I think it'd help.
Yeah.
But I think the elevation would help me illustrate my point, if you could leave it up, if it's okay if I go ahead.
Jump in.
So I think it does achieve asymmetry, you know. These drawings, this is an elevation drawing, and you don't experience life like this. You experience life in perspective. So we have a couple things going for us. These buildings are skewed from one another, creating sort of this forced perspective. That they're not planar, they're shifted significantly in space, which this doesn't illustrate. And so I think those two things, in addition to the varying widths and the varying compositions, it's arguably asymmetrical. So I think it qualifies for those reasons.
So all this discussion would lead us to say that it does comply. Is that the drift I'm gaining?
I think so.
I think so.
I agree, and I think one more factor is the positioning of the building against where most people will be viewing it from. It's already set askew from Gilman Boulevard, and unless you're actually approaching it directly from the front,
Exactly.
you wouldn't see anything close to that perspective that's in front of us here. So I would tend to agree. I think it satisfies what we're trying to accomplish with that design intent.
Great.
Does the chimney discussion fit here under massing, or is that?
I think I'll get to my next point if you don't mind, because
Okay,
I think
please.
that'll come in. Because if you can, Lucy, if you can go to G 0.03.
Oh, 3. Sorry, I lost track.
Yeah, so that one, so this is, I guess, this is the one where, I guess I very much agree about the complex roof forms. And when I look at the bottom one and I look to the roof structure to the right, even with the dormer for the stairwell, it looks like a very long, flat, plain roof from either direction looking at that. On the backside, I don't think it matters as much because I don't think people will see a lot, so adding the chimney, I think, helps. But this one is really critical, and to me, it seems like a very non-complex roof. My thought is that we would need a lot more going on this roof, like maybe a series of dormers or gabled dormers all along that roof as opposed to just one.
And excuse me, Commissioner Morgan, and is your concern views from, I'm just not, I do understand that as you approach the building, the front facade and a portion of the side facade, I'm not sure that this view will ever be available.
I think this is a good view from Gilman, and I think their front view of this is, in my mind, complex enough with the two different roof forms and the one dormer. It's beyond the dormer to the right that as it goes back, it's just one long, I don't know, 100-foot 100-foot-long flat roof with no change to it, and to me, doesn't seem complex beyond that. And given when you look at the roofs that are shown in the pictures, there's nothing that's, none of the roofs in the design guidelines are long, 100-foot-long, single roof line like that.
So are you saying that we need some dormer or some modulation to break the,
I think that line's, yeah, exactly.
okay.
I'm curious what other
Yeah,
commissioners
and I would
think
agree
about
with
that.
you, and I think we also need to remember, that's the exit on the back side, on the north side. That's where the I-90 exit is. And a lot of times people, it's a stoplight, and that's what they see, is this long, big building. And I would have to say, if you look at G.03, it's like, on the top, the rendering, it's like some homes that were put on stilt, waiting for a flood to come in, or flood has come in, and so it's raised like that. And plus this big building concept, it's like a barracks. It's like somebody took all of Rowley's storage unit, stacked them all up, and then put it up on stilts. So, and I would agree that, we need to do something to break up that long wall, that long roof, and have some kind of modulation. Just, I hate to say it, it's just kind of ugly, both from Gilman point of view and from the exit. Exit, you come down and you see that big building that's cream color. We're trying to have some greeneries around here, so you have some trees, plants. So as you're coming down I-90, going to the exit, waiting for the light, that's what you see is this cream building that's going to stand out. And it's just one flat siding with roof, and it's 4-story high, and maybe even 5 because of the roof. So if we could make some modulation in there, something like that, and I would really encourage the applicant to take a look at that. And to answer your question, to get back to this checklist that we have, I would have to say that it doesn't meet the requirements. Any comments from other commissioners?
I'm just trying to visualize what would it look like if you started modifying the roof condition, and whether that's going to be, without something to look at, whether that's going to be helpful to the architecture, overall architecture to the building, or more of a detractor.
Or too busy?
Yeah. Because I've been struggling with that elevation since the first time we saw this, and about, because it's it is a long building, it meets the dimensional requirements. I think what's done with the kind of the prominent facades to the building and this kind of western elevation, I guess it is good. I think it looks good. I think those modifications work. The one piece in the staff report about modifying this particular dormer and extending it taller and doing something that makes at least that front end portion or front third of the building look a little more interesting. I wonder if you keep going back and if we do more, I'm worried that it actually maybe not lead us down to a better design solution, like worse outcome.
Yeah, which actually sort of gets almost to I think the conflict here between the arts and crafts and the Grange style, because I still think we have a Grange style looking building. And I would be afraid that first of all, I guess I'm ambivalent about increasing the height of the stairwell dormer. I don't know that I want to make that more prominent, so I think I would leave it the way it is. But my concern would be is if we tell somebody this is a complex roof line, and it's a 100-foot long straight, not flatbed, single pitch roof, it'd be hard to tell somebody else coming in that.
Right.
that had the same, and we would say, no, that's not complex, but.
Yeah, I would agree. I think we have to just go back to the definition. Is it complex? Well, it's more complex than it was. I do appreciate what you did to the elevator and the stair tower. I think that's a market improvement. Is it complex? No, I think in this funny way, it's more simplified than it was in the previous versions with the shed roof. So I think we're probably going to struggle with a semantic battle here of what is complexity. What does that mean? And so without more footing or clarification on what that means, it's subjective. But I agree with what my other commissioners have said is if we're setting a precedent here, and I appreciate that the applicant has gone through this process and been the guinea pig, so to speak, but if this then defines complexity, I think we'll struggle in the future to have any footing to define complexity. That's what I worry about.
Yeah.
I think you said it better, but yeah.
So, luckily, I think we're doing the hardest one first. What I'm hearing is that we would, that number 27, which you can see down here at the bottom, which is about asymmetrical, that we would delete that condition based on the commissioner's conversation. Is there a consensus on that?
Yeah?
Yes.
Mr. Harrison? Okay. Okay, so, okay, and so the question remains then, relative to number 26, the way that's drafted, it's identified increasing the scale of the stairwell roofs. That seems like, at least for some commissioners, that is not a good solution in terms of addressing complexity. I think that the gable or hipped dormers matching the roof type and then intersecting ridges. So that was the idea behind increasing the stair tower. And I'm not promoting anything, I'm just talking us through it. So that would really leave us with dormers as the other choice along that facade, that eastern facade. There are certainly examples shown here, and they may be
Can I just ask Commissioner Morgan, are you saying, it says here that the roof form shall be complex. So with what we have right now, is that an elevator dormer that's sticking out? Then the rest is all flat. Are you saying that you want to see that? How do you accomplish complex, is what I'm trying to get at.
What I'm thinking is on that long roof line, that there would be more dormers.
Oh,
to
more
break-
dormers.
To break that up, to make it more complex, as opposed to one long.
Can I show you a couple more images? I was just getting my copy, so I wasn't scrolling through.
Okay.
So,
So if I can just carry on that idea, dovetail into what you're thinking, instead of adding more dormer, I mean, we don't want to add a whole bunch of dormer. How about one at each end?
Well, and then the question would be, would that be complex enough?
Yeah, would that be, complex? The roof form shall be complex, yeah. By adding, so in the end, you would have one at each end, this long roof line.
I think that bottom left picture shows you a fairly lengthy building.
So one thing to keep in mind, although these pictures are within the family of arts and crafts, I do remember having this conversation with Crandall Arambula, because you could look at this lower picture and say, why aren't we allowing shed roofs?
And different pitch roofs, too.
But these pictures are shown at the
Yeah.
scale page, not at the massing page.
Right.
So I do think, so we have to keep that in mind when we look at these pictures on other pages. You can see this one, which has the dual pitch. You know, in this area, you can see there's some sort of dormer or element that has been added. And then the last is, oops, sorry. So the multiple pitches, you know, like they're doing, sort of a double gable, that is a pretty common version. And you can tell that there is, you know, a ridge up here that is establishing the main gable, and that these are, I think, in essence, your cross ridges that were described, but in almost like a big dormer. So, so I'm just trying to identify
Yeah.
some of the pieces of vocabulary that are shown in our toolkit.
Well, and with regard to roof line, I think the bottom right is the one that shows the longest roof line for that scale. And they show at either ends fairly large dormers or ridge lines, and then a couple small dormers in between.
Well, you mean this one right here?
No, the bottom right.
Right,
This one?
Yeah,
Ah, sorry.
yeah.
yeah.
And if you look at the floor plan of the level 4, there's a fairly large studio on each end. And that would, you know, you've got a dormer on one end, and so like Commissioner Leung is talking about, you could put a dormer on the other end over the studio and create some complexity. I think that notion of complexity is really subjective.
Exactly, and as we struggle with that, really in the original description, it's saying that the roof forms are more complex than craftsman. It's really saying that more complex forms distinguish it from craftsman. It's not really saying that they must be ultimately complex. It's making a contrast with the craftsman style. Lucy, it's on the massing original description on the right side there.
No, I know. I'm trying, I was trying, oh, shoot. Let's see. What I was trying to do was find the craftsman pages.
Yeah.
Let's see. All right. Okay, so here's craftsman massing, which has a hipped roof, but you can see that it's a relatively, although you have these projections, they're sometimes incorporated into the overall roof lines and/or just, you know, a larger, simpler plane.
It's really busy.
I don't, you know, this is more what we're talking about, I think. I mean, arts and crafts and craftsmen are related to each other, so.
If we're supposed to be more complex than that, then when I look at our roof line, and
Well, they didn't say
Doesn't
don't
seem
do
like-
this, so.
Do you think it meets the design guidelines if we add another dormer at the end so that we would have two dormers on the long face of the building?
I think that would help.
Yeah?
I don't know if it'd be enough to be complex, but I think it helps, yeah.
Yeah? I just feel that, you know, this long wall. It's just, you just need some modulation in there. And I think the dormer would help. And adding 2 dormers, one at each end, would really enhance that. We're still meeting the intent of the guidelines. We're not adding a whole bunch, we're just adding one big one in front and one at the back on both sides of the building.
And I, personally, I wouldn't be worried about the other side of the building because it faces the self-storage unit. I don't think it's really going to be seen from the freeway at all.
Well, if you treat this building dramatically different than the other, even though we're trying to be asymmetrical, it really starts to get unusual in the overall architecture of the building, and so I would be concerned about that. So I guess just a couple of thoughts as this conversation is going on. So the challenge is that this is, our first run at really officially applying the new guidelines, and so we're going to unfortunately struggle a little bit. It's going to slow us down. But I think it's important choices that we're making as we make these decisions. I'm a little reluctant to actually specify a specific roof condition at the end, like put a dormer at this end, put a dormer at that end, because really it's the design professional's job to try to take the feedback and apply it in a way that makes sense for them and their client. So I hate to be that prescriptive, but there seems to be some growing consensus on the commission that try to get a more arts and crafts compliant roof condition based on our interpretation of complexity is kind of where it's headed. The other challenge is applying these fairly prescriptive architectural styles to buildings that may not, fit really well into because the box isn't the right size to really apply those features in a way that really makes a perfect fit. So we're gonna have to be somewhat flexible here because this is a very long, if you look at the examples of the arts and crafts style, and if you in Google images of arts and crafts architecture, and this is all of the examples many of them are residential sorts of projects too. But
And I think that's a good point because 200 feet is the maximum length.
Right.
That's specified in the design manual, and this is about at 200
Right.
feet.
We're at the
So
limit.
I think some of the challenges that come with that are evident.
Yeah. So I guess what we need to do is decide, whether or not this is something that we're going to need a little more work on. But we should also, if we do decide that, make sure that we have gone through the rest of the project and decided whether or not, we're good with the rest or there's other features.
And would we be comfortable with a condition, either the one that's written or something else that'll give staff the flexibility to approve changes that they might do without having to come back to the Development Commission?
Right. So it would have to be enough kind of specificity in the direction that staff would have, confidence that what they come up with is going to work. But they're not going to hear back from us later when it's under construction, right?
Well,
Which will be beyond our place to weigh in, but other than comment.
Commissioner Harrison, you?
I just feel remiss, frankly, because I think we missed an opportunity to address this in the last meeting. And I personally feel remiss because I had the same feeling last time and I didn't express it. And I think it would have been infinitely more productive of this commission to have brought these issues, this issue up last time. And I am guilty as charged. I feel that it is absolutely true that the building is asymmetrical on its front. And it's not on the side. It's not. So what do you do with that? And I would suggest that, along with Commissioner Brennan, that we express the concern that the commission has, and then give it to the applicant and the staff to address our concerns, which I think are legitimate, but I'm really reluctant to start requiring specific things to address our concerns.
The proposed condition says that roof forms shall be complex through the use of dormers and/or increasing the scale of the stairwell roofs to create more visible intersecting ridges. So they've complied with some of that, but the sense of the commission, as best I can tell, is that it's not complex enough. The other part of that proposed condition was that the composition is not asymmetrical, and I think there's a fairly consistent agreement that it is asymmetrical.
Asymmetrical enough, yeah. So we would
Enough.
take out,
Yes.
So you take out B.
Right.
And leave A.
So one of the things, again, that's up for discussion, but what I've done is, on your form, put in a place for comments and conditions on each page. So I've already, based on, and luckily this is easy to retype if you disagree, but I just noted that we're deleting number 27, for instance, so that we are able to sort of track the decisions as you make them, not that we can't go back and revisit those to ensure that we're getting to the right place. I would say to Commissioner Harrison, we all set a high bar for ourselves. I think last meeting, we, staff did not do, I think the commission has done a fabulous job of leading the way on how to really fully implement this. I think, I know that when I did it, I mainly focused on the front facade, not the east and west facades, thinking that those weren't going to be so visible. I think you've challenged us on that. I think that's a great thing. And so I think you challenged the staff to go back and do a more detailed evaluation and the applicant to respond to that based on your conversations last time. We're all going to learn, and we're not going to get this exactly right the first time. So I feel like we're making excellent progress.
One point, if I can just make, we're concentrating on structures, and I sense that it's the long siding, long roof that we have. There are different ways of breaking up that long walls and long roof. You could do it by material. You can do it by modulation. You can do it with colors and make it, meet the requirements. It doesn't have to be structured.
well, in this case, we're looking at the description in the style says the steeper, more complex roof forms, vertical emphasis distinguish the style for craftsmen. So we have to, in the code, we're supposed to have a steeper, more complex roof form than what we'd see in craftsmen.
I think Commissioner Leong may be referring to some of the tools that we had in the central Issaquah standards, which are not really available anymore, at least in terms of this particular style.
One comment, obviously, we've had a little problem with the word complex here.
Yeah.
And complexity. I wonder as we go through this and we use this tool and we're turning up little variations like this that are tough, can we make notes for Rev A of this document, even though it hasn't been really released in its final form yet? Because I bet this is not the only incident like this, that we'll come across.
Yeah.
Good point. Good observation.
Right. I will tell you, like many commissioners who are hesitant to design by commission, I'm going to be hesitant about certain words like asymmetrical and complexity, trying to define those in any kind of prescriptive way. I think the question is, as we go through this, is there a clear performance standard that provides better guidance? And I think Commissioner Sanford is absolutely right. If we can identify those along the way, we should absolutely capture those. Likewise, the mayor has asked us, as we get interpretations from Crandall or Rambula, I save all of those into a folder so that likewise those can be incorporated. So I think your instincts are absolutely right. I think we just have to be careful thinking that we will come up with a cookbook. I think I think it's going to be hard to get as black and white manual as we might like.
An idea with regard to the staff proposed condition A, about roof forms shall be more complex with the use of dormers and/or increasing the scale of the stairwell roofs to create more visible intersecting ridges. A couple things here. One is, I don't think just treating the stairwell would be enough because we still have the long run. And I'm fine with the stairwells the way they are. I would rather change this language just to say, through the use of dormers or other features in the roof, and then leave it to the staff and the applicant. That works for everybody.
I would agree.
Okay. That makes sense, Lucy?
Yeah, I didn't start typing because I didn't want to assume that everyone was going to agree with you, and then they did. So was it through the use of dormers and?
Or dormers and/or other features.
Roof features?
To create more-
Roof features?
Other roof features. And then you could just put period.
That's a phrase right now.
Well, roof forms shall be.
Oh, okay, I'm
or no,
sorry, I
shall
thought
be-
we were skipping that.
No, I
Okay.
think shall be made more complex
Yeah, so
through the use of dormers or other features. Does that work for everybody?
you get it?
Should we say,
Shall be,
or other features found in the arts and crafts guidelines? You know, I think if you open it up to features, then what does that mean?
Yeah.
more.
Okay,
You could see the shed roof come back.
yeah.
Is a chimney a
Good idea.
feature?
Or
Did you say
consistent.
arts and crafts style, or?
Consistent with the arts and crafts style.
Yeah.
That's why we have lawyers.
That works for me.
I like that.
Okay.
So let me ask you, thank you, that was great. So do we need to mark any of the boxes that are up here, or do we just assume that except where, for instance, my mouse pad skills are kind of poor, but we're sort of coloring in this complies here. And then, are we saying that pretty much everything else is acceptable, except maybe the three that I boxed in on the right for roof are just kind of leaving them open to decide how much we need of any of those? So are we feeling comfortable with the rest of the manner in which staff filled out this form?
I think so.
I thought you had the appropriate for the massing is not comply, the asymmetrical composition and elevation and volume, and we think it is asymmetrical. We think it complies with that. It's
Yeah,
a-
that's where she's.
So I've kind of
sorry,
very
okay, yeah,
poorly
no,
colored it in
No,
here.
I got it.
Okay.
Thank you.
No, we're figuring it out. So right now, though, I've said under description that it does not comply because of the complex roof form. So for now, we would leave that, and the condition is to address it, correct?
Agreed.
Is that good form? Okay. All right. Are we
So can
ready?
I just really quick, since it looks like we're dealing with this as a condition, does staff have enough to work with in the general sense of the commission here on
You
what the
must be a director of development services.
the finish line looks like here?
I haven't had a chance to talk with the applicant. My thought is we could try to proceed with this. We also have another meeting on the 16th. So one way to approach this might be to, if we get to this point, approve this, and we bring the roof back for confirmation at the next meeting, just because I think we're still working through it, and I would like to make sure that you're not going to be giving me feedback I can't do anything with in a year.
I think the good test is going to be, you could just take whatever you come up with, take it around to staff and say, does this look complex?
Okay.
And it'd be like, the old Supreme Court and pornography and stuff, right? Don't know how to define it, but
I need more clerks, that's what I'll say.
yeah, there you go.
Okay. So I feel like we have a means to move forward from this page,
Okay.
if the commissioners agree.
Agreed, I think we agree.
Hey, I don't want to lose the chimney. I don't know if this is the
Oh.
chimney topic or not.
Yes.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, the chimney, its placement kind of strikes me as inconsistent with the rest of the building, kind of superfluous. There was appreciate the attempt to be more asymmetrical and match the arts and crafts style. That is an arts and crafts feature for sure. Seems to stand out a little incongruously to me. Wondered what the commissioner's input was on that.
I guess one of my thoughts would be, the way it may tie in is if you look at G 0.08, I guess the view if you're coming down the trail, and the view you'd see there of the building, the brick down below is all going to be that raven-colored black brick, and then that chimney up above will be the raven-colored black brick, and maybe those two tie together.
Well, to try and be true to the design manual, I think that what Commissioner Sanford is asking us to do is sort of look at the notion of a prominent chimney, maybe in the context of asymmetricality. We don't, I think the one thing that the manual implies but does not state overtly is sort of things that are authentic. The chimney, while very well intended, is never going to be connected to any heat source. So I think the question is the visual benefit such that we would add something faux?
Exactly, Lucy, thank you. Yeah, it's a faux chimney. So it feels superfluous to me, and it's kind of like form did not follow function there because there's really no function.
I mentioned some. The chimney, although we did try to make it look like a chimney, is required for the elevator shaft. It's the overrun for the elevator.
Oh, perfect, okay.
I mean,
So it's functional.
something needs to be there,
Excellent.
so it isn't just stuck
Love
on there
it.
for a look.
Excellent idea, the chimney, that's what I said. Perfect.
You saved the day. I was going to ask that, because I assumed it was functional too, and when I heard it wasn't, I was going to go, wow, but it's functional, okay.
Good thing we have an architect in the room. So are we comfortable leaving the chimney then?
Yeah, certainly.
Okay, great.
Do some faux smoke.
Okay, so are we done with massing?
Yeah.
Wow.
Oops.
I'm good with scale.
Yeah, we're done with massing.
Right on the border, 200 feet.
Okay, walls, materials?
I guess a question, the striking out the natural finish board and batten.
So let me double check that. This is one thing that we spent a long time asking Crandall Arambula about when we got to, oh, it does. So it does, even in the final one, say natural stained or painted. So one of our concerns
Okay.
was that they had a lot of like true divided light windows, you know, things that would not have allowed you to use any hardy materials that are painted, that would look like exactly like board and batten, at least to the untrained eye. And there was a question on our part, they said no simulated stone, but does that mean you have to have full stone wall? So trying to clarify some of that. So the ultimate way, this says natural board and batten in the July draft, but in the adopted draft, it says natural stained or painted board and batten.
Okay.
So I think, I struck it because it isn't natural board and batten.
Well, and I wonder, this said natural finish, so maybe it just meant the finish on it, not the actual natural wood, but
Okay.
I'm good with it.
It's another one of those things that we could all interpret differently. I would
Yeah.
interpret that as it's the actual material that's exposed. You might be stained, but it would be a natural material that you would see. And I just don't know that that's what we want to mandate,
Right.
because that takes away all kinds of color and design options. So.
And I think that's where, even though we are using the July draft, I think sometimes the adopted draft is informative about, where we ended up and whether that,
Agreed.
Yeah.
so does that mean we're okay with walls?
Yes.
Yes, I'm okay with walls.
Windows?
I'm okay.
Issues with windows?
Everyone okay with windows?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
Then that would leave doors.
I'm okay.
Yeah, I appreciate the design changes to respond to this
Yeah.
criteria, so I think that was helpful.
Look very good.
Okay. Next is roof, which I think is pretty straightforward.
Go back to green sheet language.
And then color.
Where'd our
I think good.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I'm good.
color's good.
Okay. Then natural context, we received, public comment, not tonight, but in writing about that. So I want to make sure that the commission has an opportunity to consider. I think staff's perspective was we didn't really know what those terms were. There aren't any critical areas immediately present. The trail was shown on the map that was not adopted at this point or even proposed at this point. So I think it's just a question of how the commission wants to interpret it.
I'm fine with it.
Yeah, I think this is going to be another one of those where we'll have discussions along the way with different projects about what does that mean. I think the key is the context. I mean, what's the circumstance that's immediately surrounding, but not just that, what's the backdrop behind a project? And the backdrop behind this project is a freeway. But it is, something we're going to have to think about when we're talking about integration. Because I remember even when we were dealing with the Costco expansion discussion and about view corridors and what does that mean, trying to make sure we're really leveraging the natural environment around the city, including the mountains that are around the city. So I think this is one we'll be coming back to more. But I think for this particular project, I'm comfortable with what we've got.
And what I would add to Commissioner Brennan's comments is that by the time that we actually adopted it, we actually created a specific list. The map is illustrative because things can change over time, but there was a specific list of triggers like a wet, because some of the areas that are shown here are actually developable land, so we weren't trying to take away anyone's rights. On the other hand, I think that we feel that there is a response necessary when you're adjacent to certain features, and what we had to do was agree on what those features were.
Good.
And so through the time with Land and Shore Committee, we did agree on a list of features, so.
That'll help.
Yeah, I think it will. So Harmony, I highlighted July 20th, as you can see at the top of the page, and that is because that one was pretty amorphous. And by the time, we said we need something measurable, something kind of tangible. And so if you look at the one on the left, which is the one that was adopted, it talks about certain kinds of elements, but it also identifies that if you're using an architectural style, the result of that is to help create harmony. Now, it may inform which style you select. That if you're next to something that's more arts and crafts, you're probably not going to do Grange. But we also have to look at the scale of the building, and sometimes, as we've so painfully learned going through this project, sometimes the scale of a building does not lend itself to the style that you might want to pick.
This is one, I think we're fine here in this case. I mean, the colors, they've done a good job, I think, of sort of matching the color palette to get that harmonious. But this is one, I'm fine with this. I think in the long term, this is a very dangerous one for us to work with, because we're going to get a situation where we get say a single-family house, single story, and we want to build a 5-story building next to it, and somebody can say, well, that's not in harmony with it. And I think the idea of incremental development, that you always have to build a house or a building in harmony with the one right next to it each time, doesn't allow you to bring in a lot of changes. But I'm sorry, I shouldn't be
No,
wasting our time discussing
I think
it,
we
yeah.
had some of the same questions. And so if you look at the description on the left, it says that there's a relationship between the new building and the existing, but the intent is not to require imitation or copying.
Yeah.
Instead, the integrity of existing buildings shall be respected by positively addressing nearby existing development characteristics. Because what we didn't want to was reiterate something we're trying to move away from.
It's back to respecting the context that you're developing in. I mean, whether it's natural or built, it's got to fit. And again, that's subjective in a lot of ways too, about what that looks like, whether we're talking about harmony between the architecture and style of a building, or the how it's interfacing with the natural environment that's going on around it. So this is just part of the learning that we're going to do as we continue to apply these. But I'm feeling, this has been a little slow, but I'm feeling like as we do this a little bit more, this tool set will help us so much compared to what we were working with before we got this.
And I think this is actually an example that's a good one to start with in that respect, because it seems to me, as I understand it, that the existing storage facility was designed before these new standards came into effect, and now we spent all this time with the new standards, and they're in effect, and we're looking at the district. So I don't think that, with all due respect, the Up House phenomenon, the movie. It's going to be a permanent factor for us, for the city going forward.
Right.
But the objective is to have these districts with better architectural guidelines than we've had before, which is a really good thing for everybody involved. But it inevitably is going to conflict with the property next door, because we're changing.
And I think that's a good point, as well as that there are some other sections of the guidelines up in the introduction, as well as the context section, which is talking about both built and natural environment. I think that when we look at that, it'll help provide some guidance around addressing that very point. Okay. Block size. So I think that I'm a little confused by Ms. Marsh's comments, whether she was talking about something back of the building or along the front of the building that would form a sidewalk kind of on the service road. I think that if what she's requesting is that there be pedestrian features along that sort of service road frontage, I think that's fine. And that a little sort of stub or sort of gesture to the next property line so you don't have to negotiate with the property owner could certainly be made. I think if it's along I-90, I guess I would be concerned. That doesn't seem like the right place.
I'd agree. I think everything, the intent of this is to not have super blocks, and it's for breaking up the grid, the street grid, into smaller block sizes. And this doesn't fit, this site doesn't fit that at all to me.
And I feel like just the massing of the building achieves it. You know, the fact that they did break it down into two separate
Yeah.
buildings conceptually helps significantly.
Yeah, it is, and if you're thinking about, and the example is kind of a gridded street pattern with long blocks, and you do want to have the ability for pedestrians to travel through without having to go all the way around. But there's nothing on the back of this. So I tend to agree with that. What I think the requirement is trying to get at doesn't fit with the site conditions we have here.
Agreed.
Agreed.
Okay?
So we're in agreement that it's not applicable.
Correct.
Parking structures and lots?
Acceptable? Complies?
Yeah, acceptable.
Good with the screening with the provision that the plantings are
The
year-round.
evergreen. So is that a condition? Do we need to?
Well, we could certainly make it one. I think it's not like we're saying it's wrong, we're just specifying what kind of plantings should
Yeah.
be implemented. I think it's fine to make it a condition. I'm doubting that the applicant disagrees.
There's an existing condition, isn't there, regarding the screening right now? I'm not sure. Or maybe there isn't.
I think it's about parking landscape screening as opposed to the
Visual
structured
relief.
screening.
Back.
So
I think the intent is that the parking area will be screened.
right.
And so it's not screened 6 months out of the year, screened the whole year. So that's, seems to me to be pretty obvious for the applicant to comply with that. I don't, maybe we need to emphasize it, but
We have a condition 33 regarding the garage lighting. I don't know if you want to tack screening onto that or if it's something completely different.
Okay, let me just, I have too many pieces of paper. Yeah, we could add that on there. Okay, all right. Next is enclosure, which we said complies. Does the commission agree?
Yes.
And the appropriate, when upper floors are set back, incorporate terraces and usable, would that just be NA instead of complies?
Yes, I think so.
Yeah. Is there a dimensional requirement where the step back has to happen, at what height?
It was after the first 4 floors, and this building's only 4
That's
floors
right, 'cause
tall.
that was in, I think you made that, Dan made the comment in the staff report. So it wouldn't be applicable here.
Right. Are we ready to move on to the next one?
Yes, we are.
Okay, setbacks, ground floor retail.
Acceptable?
Yeah, that's right for the plaza.
Complies.
Yep.
Okay, then setbacks, natural areas, and what staff was basically saying is if we don't have something that we're defining as natural areas, then this section doesn't apply.
Natural off-ramp?
Careful. So are we good to move on from this page?
Agree.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Ground floor entries. This
Apply.
one, staff did propose a condition.
I have an issue with this one, and it's kind of more with the code itself. Could you pull up A 2.0?
Yep.
Maybe if you could zoom in just a little bit, a little more.
Did you want both
Well,
of them?
Both of them, if you could, yeah. Great, thank you. So I guess the issue I have, just in reading this, in terms of the design standard or the development standard, the idea of we're in essence saying, we want the retail in the front, we want the parking back behind, but we don't want you to get from the parking into the retail. We want you to have to go around the building to get in the retail. And the real issue I see with this is with the handicap stalls, the 2 handicap stalls in the middle there. So if I'm in a wheelchair and I get out of my van and then I look across and I want to go into that retail space, there's a door there that's going to be service and employees only. And I'm going to have to go outside and come back in the entry to the retail. And then it's even further to get around to the other entry for the retail, which makes me wonder, would we be violating any ADA codes?
Well, I'll
by
tell you, if
requirement?
we're violating ADA codes, that trumps everything.
Yeah.
But I will tell you that we pushed a lot on this particular provision. You know, Issaquah Highlands has those double-faced buildings, but, you know, Crandall Arambula's point is a valid one, that what we saw at Issaquah Highlands is that some of the shops have put essentially their back door to the street and their front door to the parking lot. And it was a real battle, and we had enough trouble just getting the 2 doors. Many of them didn't even want a front door to the street. So I understand their concern is that if we are really building a pedestrian environment, then we need to put all of our sort of oomph towards the street. Point well taken about ADA. You're right, it has to be closest to the entry. And if there was a concern that, for instance, this entry needs to be open to because of ADA parking, I think that would take precedence over our pedestrian orientation. But
What about the upper one? Would you have to have a door from the garage for ADA, or you can require them to go out and around?
I believe so. My understanding is that you have to put the ADA as close as possible where the parking is. But, you
Parking
know,
doesn't have to be closed.
The proposed condition
it's
could just
subject
be
to,
modified.
Yeah.
if there was parking in front of the building, then you would put it there.
Yeah.
But there's not.
Okay.
So,
Okay.
you know, it's a good question, and I imagine as we go through this review with the building department, I will become more informed. You know, every time you go through this, you learn something new, and that's a good question, and I'll let you know when we have another building.
And I would agree that your interpretation is correct of what's written, with the only provision being it talks about parking lots, and could a parking garage be considered something different than a parking lot? But I don't see that I can make that stretch. You know, it talks about entries directly from parking lots shall be limited to service employee and so forth. And this is a parking garage, not a parking lot. But
Yeah, yeah. Legally, I think you're right. I think we're all okay with the ADA access. It's just a little bit longer to travel. And, you know, the layout probably needs to be revisited to kind of shorten the travel from the vehicle to the retail. And we're assuming all the handicapped folks are going to retail. And they may go up to the elevator and go up to the upper floors.
So I think that's an interesting point about the customer entries access directly from parking lots or alleys. So I'll pursue making sure that I'm not overly narrowly
Confident.
interpreting that.
And it's more of in my mind, it's more of one of those longer review thing, you know, down the road reviewing these standards.
Yeah, maybe this is worth flagging for a
Yeah.
section to revisit, yeah, to look at more closely.
But I tend to agree with the underlying intent about creating the activity at the front of the building and pushing the pedestrians out there. And in this particular building, you actually have, from the parking garage, this pathway that leads between the two buildings that gets you to the, it's not that far to travel, and the ADA requirement is closest proximity that's feasible to the main entrance, and a safe path of travel. So I think they've probably accomplished that with this. The question, though, is really about, you know, in the future, you know, what are we trying to do with these buildings, these particularly larger retail uses that are going to occur as more buildings develop? I think if you push it the way that Lucy's interpreting this now, it drives a design solution like this, that you want to provide a nice pathway to get people to the commercial uses in your building instead of driving them through the back door from the garage. So, we'll see.
Yeah,
Okay. Yeah.
okay.
Okay, so
Thank you.
that sounds like we're okay with this page?
Yes. Reluctantly.
Well, it looks like there were a lot of changes in the adopted version, and I can't read it fast enough because my brain is just kind of frying at this point. So it may be, we may have actually different text when we are using the adopted version. Ground floor commercial entries had the same issue. Oh, thank you.
I'm good with ground floor entries.
And then transparency, this one was requiring a little bit larger window on the west face of the east wing.
Yeah.
Okay.
The condition addresses the design concern, so.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, and then
I'm sorry, just back up one second. I
Sure.
guess actually in terms of checking the box,
Not complete.
would we say not comply
Right.
with the size? Would it be the very guideline at the top that would not comply?
Yeah, sorry, that's a good point.
Thank you.
Yeah, no, thank you. Okay. And then ground floor commercial complied
Agree.
from staff's perspective. Commission agree?
Agree?
Okay. And then last, second to last is the weather protection.
So somewhere here would have to say not comply.
I got comply crazy, huh?
I think part of this is, and this is practice though, is how are we going to fill out the checklist? Because if we say, we could say does not comply, and then when we have a does not comply, there would be a condition
Yeah, that
Right.
would make it
Practice.
comply, right.
that would bring it into compliance, but then
Yeah.
do you check the box comply? Because now the condition brings it into compliance. So anyway, so I think we just have to decide which way we're going to do it,
Yeah.
and then just keep doing it that way.
Or complies with condition.
Yeah. I think the does not comply flags it, and then it brings you to the condition that says there's a condition that needs to be addressed to bring it to compliance.
Yeah.
And you know, to get full planner wonk on, after you, assuming that you approve this project, Dan will be drafting findings and conclusions, and basically that's what the findings and conclusions say, is that with the conditions, it complies. You know, and so it's not just that it complies, but that with the conditions as written, it complies. So, I mean, I think that this sort of helps tie that loop back together. But I agree, that's one of our sort of outstanding questions. Okay, and then, the last is the usable open space.
Agree?
Agree.
Okay, go team. All right. So what I will do is, while you speak with Dan about the briefing response memo, I'll work on the conditions to edit some of them relative to what you've done this evening.
So now we open it up for questions on the briefing response memo.
Sure. Or comments?
Or comment.
Just walk through.
So do you have,
Well, should we just go through the staff responses and see if we agree with what he's done?
Sure.
Is that what you're thinking, Lucy?
I'm not thinking, so I'm totally open.
I'm real quick, just from a process standpoint, I'm trying to, a lot of the responses that are in the briefing response memo, we've already just talked about.
Uh-huh.
So I'm just, from a management of time standpoint, I'm just wondering, are there specific topical areas that need additional discussion, or do we think that they've adequately been addressed in the conversation as we've gone through the design standards?
I feel like we addressed them, and then we even provided condition for investigating the complexity of the roof. So I feel like it was,
I think most of that's been all driven around the design standards, but any of the,
oh, you're circling back to
circling back to the beginning, yeah.
the memo.
Yeah, so the design manual covered topics 2 and 3. So if you have any questions or concerns about whether the other topics have been appropriately addressed, then
Okay, would the Trail Connection Plaza fall under this category?
correct, yeah.
Okay.
So I wonder if we just walk through, you know, the first procedures, number 1, does anybody have any concerns with the responses with regard to our purview or the district visions? Okay.
I did. So the sense is that we've resolved, or we're comfortable with 2 and 3? Or do you want to talk about those as well?
We just went through the design manual.
Yeah, so 2 and 3
Right.
would have been what the discussion we just had with
Yeah.
Lucy.
I feel like we're there.
Good with those?
Okay. And in terms of I guess, into 4, the elevator shaft, I would agree with the condition that's been added.
And the language regarding the screening, the plant screening,
Uh-huh.
and that as well.
And the garage lights. I do
Oh.
appreciate the additional, they brought down the building to screen the lights, and I guess in general, I have to say, I appreciate a lot of the changes that you've made from our last meeting to address things. You did a very good job.
Definitely.
So I believe, I think we talked about bundling in the year-long plants or for screening, bundling that in with the garage lights condition. I believe that there is already a parking screening condition that we might be able to include that with.
Right, that was number 33, Dan?
So the original condition, and I apologize because I don't have it in front of me.
Yeah, I have that stolen. I'm not sure that let's look.
It says garage lighting with the building permit, the applicant will provide photometric plans and other lighting details to demonstrate compliance with CIDDS Chapter 17 lighting, especially for parking standards.
Well, I think the one that Dan may be referring to is number 13 from the original staff report, which talks about the surface parking lot shall be softened with the required 10% landscaping provision of it states, additionally, the applicant shall provide plans to be reviewed with construction permits that demonstrate compliance with 15.3. So we could add another sentence to that condition number 13,
Okay.
or it could go on 33, either one, that says that the plantings on the east side of the building associated with the grid screen will be climbing evergreen.
We'll provide year-round screening,
Yeah.
something
Do
like
you
that.
care
So it's
which condition it goes on to?
Sounds like 13 was more.
It was better, yeah.
That was my thought.
Or 9?
So would we be to 5, the plaza design? I appreciate the fact that they got a meeting together and got input from some different groups, and I think what they've come up with is a better plaza. I don't feel like we should hold this up and say we need to come up with a grand entrance to Issaquah, force a developer to come up with something that is grander than what they've come up with for this already, but.
Is that because the status of this is kind of tenuous at this point, whether that trail connection plaza will even exist?
Well, I guess that, and I don't know, it seems like they've met the intent of creating a way station, the tools, the bench.
Yeah.
The extent that the city wants to do a bunch more signage or other stuff,
Yeah, I guess my thought was, I wonder if there's an opportunity there. There's a beautiful redesign of, I guess it's called the Building Plaza, and it's very verdant and lots of planting in there. And I wonder if any of that could be migrated into the Front Trail Connection Plaza as well. I wonder if there's a tree opportunity there instead of the hardscape that's being referred to.
So I think that, no, Dan, go ahead.
So that is, King County did provide us with a trail section, some guidelines with that. We can do some shrubs, but we cannot do any trees within 15 feet of the edge of pavement.
Okay, so we're
And
constrained by the county there.
We are constrained by that, yes.
However, didn't you say, Dan attended the meeting, I didn't. Didn't you say that that this drawing is representational of sort of the hardscape and structural elements, but that landscape along the edges was planned?
So you can do some
Like shrubs?
shrubs, but even those have a setback requirement.
Okay, of the 15 feet?
No, I believe it's 3 feet.
The tree thing was because of roots interfering with.
Right. So I think we would look to have some kind of shrubs, but again, that's part of the negotiation with the county. They had a rather natural palette that they identified, is my memory.
Correct. That is true. So we would work it out with them, and again, they did provide us with some of those guidelines, and I provided that with the last presentation. I don't have it here now.
I think also in the stakeholder meeting, they recommended that that cover be consistent with the storage building, is that right? Is that the intent, or is it to be more consistent with our lofts building?
So I believe that the roof structure of that trellis would be designed to match with the storage building. Are you?
Is that not the right image?
No, it would be. Take a look. Sorry. I keep missing it. I did have a picture, right?
Yeah, that one. This one.
Ah, here we go. Thank you. So we identified this, I guess it's some sort of roof overhang or
Trellis?
trellis, and that we would use that same design to work with the plaza trellis.
Well, I think the work they've done is definitely an enhancement with what we had previously, and the idea of trying to connect back into the buildings, I think is good. I think, you know, this idea of this grand arrival plaza, well, that's not really, in my mind, that you haven't arrived, you've arrived at Gilman Boulevard and some buildings nearby, but you haven't, it's not like a large public place or community center or anything like that. So, I mean, the idea is they want people to actually keep going, head into Old Town and buy stuff. So
Or just keep bicycling.
or just get on going, right. So I think this idea of it's a kind of this point where you can pause. I mean, you're at a kind of major intersection, you can pause, you can, you know, hopefully not have to fix your bike, but if you have to, hey, you might have some tools handy, is fine. The idea of softening it with landscaping as best we can within the limits that we're given with the county, I think is a good idea to do that. But you also have, now you're going to have this discussion about who's going to maintain this, and I think that's going to be the root of the debate, get to some agreement. And that's, the more you put in, the more costly it becomes to take care of it.
I imagine that's a city responsibility then, right? Public
The,
property?
as I understand it, King County has had bad experiences. But I think we're hoping to be able to do, because the applicant is actually prepared to maintain it. So I think we're kind of hoping we could do some, okay, I don't want to misspeak for you, Bob. I thought that was where we were. So I think we're hoping maybe there's some kind of co-sign partnership thing so that the city functions as a backstop. But, you know, we've only met once with them, and there's additional discussion necessary.
So can I, a procedural question on this? So this is a condition of the development agreement, that they do the plaza, which requires and I don't have the development agreement open in front of me.
Can you go back to the
Was there
slide?
was there an out? If there was, okay, never mind. You don't need to go any farther. That's fine. Because it hangs up this whole permit if there's not a off-ramp.
All right.
Were there any others you wanted to
So you want to talk
Building plaza?
building plaza?
I actually like what they did with the building plaza.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah.
I think that's going to be a nicer space to pause, and it'll be good for the retail users. I think it'll be, I mean, it's more attractive. There's seating. I think it was, previously, I thought it was fairly stark and not inviting, and I think the new ideas, the water feature, I think is nice.
Yeah,
Yeah,
agree.
All right.
Randy, Commission. There's your dog-friendly water fountain, 5.2.c.
So I think what we were discussing earlier was that there was some hope that there'd be a water fountain on the Trail Plaza side, but that's not possible.
We're not going to do that. Yeah, you got to run water, you got to run drain.
Well, and again, it's still county-owned property. So.
Oh. Yeah.
Parking? So I did, I was checking, so the City of Seattle requires one stall per 2,000 square feet for storage and one per 1,000 square feet for office. So half a stall per 1,000 for storage, one for office. And I looked at the lost portion, the 45,000 square feet are required is 35, which would be 0.78 per 1,000, which is right in between. But the provided is 43, which I calculate to be 0.96 per 1,000, which right at about 1 per 1,000, which seems to match the City of Seattle requirements for office parking. So it seems to fit in general with what Seattle's doing and maybe what their basis was for whatever they approved there. So I'm fine with the parking.
Yeah, this required kind of a different approach because, you know, we do have our own parking standards for office. We recognized this as something entirely different that needed to be evaluated on a case-by-case basis.
Yeah.
And are we good with the recommendation to remove conditions 10, 11, and 12?
Yes.
Yeah. They're provided.
But we would be adding a condition to address the loading spaces.
I'm fine with the traffic signal.
Agree.
Trees?
I'm fine with environmental. What do people think about the trees?
Well, the reality is with that significant design change as far as on-site plantings for additional trees, there's not a lot of opportunity for that. And there was an attempt to try to do some agreement with WashDOT, and that wasn't successful, which is unfortunate, but they have their reasons, I'm sure.
Liability.
Possibly. So, I mean, at this point, this is kind of still, the ultimate solution is not yet defined. I mean, what the tree plantings are going to be and where they're going to be, although there's a requirement to meet threshold that's necessary. So I'm not seeing, it would be nice to see more on-site, but the reality is I just don't know that it's a practical thing to advance at this point, this project. I think we've done a lot to try to enhance the areas where we're going to have the interaction with the pedestrians at the front of the building. Hopefully we can get a little bit more with the plaza, on the trail. Trees are off the site already. It's been cleared.
Aren't those trees that are behind it, those are all cottonwoods? I mean, they're all kind of dangerous trees that we don't want around anyway. Be nice if you get the state to agree to let us replace them.
Yeah, well, we also anticipate on the property line common with Pagachas, who also has some very big cottonwoods like that, that we may request as part of our permit application to a joint redevelopment of that landscape strip so that it's more appropriate.
Yeah.
But we can't do that until we get a little further.
It seemed like it'd be nice if the state would agree to say, as part of the tree planning for this, to take out those cottonwoods and put something better in there.
Right.
Would it be?
Amazing.
Would it be constructive for us to just note that it's the sense of the commission, the Development Commission, to acknowledge a public comment to the effect that this site should have as many trees as is possible within the plan?
Yeah, absolutely. And that is a condition. It's condition 14 of the original staff report.
Condition 14?
Condition 14 is that we will continue to try to identify areas where we can plant trees on site, and for those where, you know, they will have a required number of trees that they have to replant. If, you know, I'm just throwing out a number here, if they're required to replant 40 and they can get 10, then the other 30 will need to be planted off-site or paid into the city tree fund.
But I do think if you look at the condition 14, I think we could add some language about the goal is to get as many trees as
On-site.
healthful, as is health, I can't even speak at this point. That's what happens when you have 2 commission nights in a row.
When we have Land Shore tomorrow.
Yes, we have another one tomorrow. Yours is longer, yeah. So let me add, I'll just type up some language for you to look at to add to that condition. While you talk about the last item.
The last item is the bus stop.
Continue with the metro.
Yeah.
Continue work with metro.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not a bus stop expert, but I think we want to locate it in the most optimum spot that works for transit service.
And those conversations, the applicant did reach out to Metro, and I've been in contact with them too, so that's ongoing.
Okay.
More comments, questions, concerns?
Issues?
Want to go to a motion?
Do you want to go to a motion?
Go to a motion.
Do you have a motion to make?
Lucy, you ready for us to go to motion?
I am at your service.
Well, I'll just read that then. So I move that the Development Commission approve site development permit number SDP 17-00003 for the Issaquah Lost project number PRJ 17-00012 as described and evaluated in the staff report dated March 23rd, 2018, with exhibits A through G, the briefing response memo dated April 25th, 2018, with exhibits A through E, the project drawings and reports received November 16, 2017, and all subsequent submittals up to April 19, 2018, and subject to the conditions contained in the staff report and removed and new conditions contained in the briefing response memo, new condition numbers 25, 26, and 28 through 34?
Well, yeah,
Or should I just remove?
I just go ahead and read numbers 25 through 34, and
25
then
through
we've got the
34.
rest of it up on the screen.
Okay, and remove conditions number 10, 11, 12, and 27?
Oh, well, that wasn't in the memo, though.
Oh, okay.
Do you see what I'm saying? So I
Gotcha,
just read
gotcha,
it
yeah.
as written and then say,
Yeah.
and as amended.
Right, and as amended tonight. Great. Should I go ahead and or just?
You can read them or not read them, or you could just say, or as amended tonight, and we've got this up,
Yeah.
and we will do this as the basis.
Great.
Look at 13 and 14 and make sure you're comfortable with that language.
And is that the west side?
Is that the west side or the east side?
East.
Thank you. See, that's why I have you read these things.
You're testing us.
The
That's
other
good.
east.
Yeah, it was intentional.
But as
Both
many-
practical, on 14, well, you'd have to eliminate both, but practical and cognizant of tree health and public safety.
Okay.
As many,
I'm sorry, Lucy, you got, I hate to be a grammarian here, but.
No, I love it. I'm really
You'd have to take
tough.
both out because you've got three. There you go.
are we comfortable with the word maybe, many trees, as many trees?
Uh-huh.
Yes. Or do we want to say minimum of,
No,
okay,
Yeah,
as many trees as possible? Okay.
with, under those conditions, they need to be healthy and not create a public safety risk in where they locate.
and Lucy, the second part, do you want us to vote on the first and then vote on the second?
So
one?
that is your tradition. UVDC reads the whole thing and votes on it all at the same time. So I think it's just whatever you
Okay.
would prefer.
You guys comfortable doing it all as one?
Let's go for it.
And I move that the Development Commission direct the Development Services Department to prepare findings of fact and conclusions for review and approval by the Development Commission Chair, affirming the Development Commission's decision to approve the Issaquah Lost Project Site Development Permit Number SDP 17-00003, subject to conditions listed in the staff report, modified the briefing response memo, and as amended tonight, period.
Second,
We have a motion, it's been seconded, is there discussion? Further discussion?
real quick, just the complexity issue on the roof. So we're approving this permit with that as a condition, so we're done when we pass this motion. Everybody understand? I just want to make sure everybody
Trusting
understands.
it to Lucy.
That they've feedback
You know who to blame now.
Okay,
Coming back.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
okay.
All right.
Okay.
Vote.
To say all in favor?
All those in favor of the proposal, the motion to approve, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you.
And I think unless people want to stay a little longer, I think we ought to.
Before we adjourn, though, I think we have at least one commission member maybe that's leaving the commission.
Yeah.
Commissioner Leelong.
Yes, sir.
So I just thought it would be appropriate just to take a moment to say, it's been amazing working with you for the many years that I've been on the commission, and you've been here many more than that, so 20 plus or so. So I just, it's an incredible commitment to the community, and really appreciated your perspective and sharing your comments, and best of luck to you with whatever you decide to do from here.
You're here.
Thank you. Thank you.
And we're glad that you made the right choice and moved from Planning Policy to Development Commission.
That's right. That's right. I was with the PPC for about 2-3 years and just didn't see a lot of things coming up. This policy, and as you know, it takes quite a while before you see something happens, if ever it happens.
So Ray, do you have a plan to replace the income that you're going to lose from?
Zero. I have to talk to my wife about that. But I understand we're getting, or you guys are getting a 5% raise?
Yes.
I would like to,
We'll share it with you.
Okay, yeah, let me know when you get it.
Thank
We'll
you
go
very
out for a
much.
beer or something.
Thank you very much for your service.
thank you, Ray. And I would like to thank the members of the public that commented and that may have been watching on the television. So thank you for your participation. We always like the public to come down and provide input. It's really critical and vital to us. So thank you for your time, and let's call the meeting adjourned.
Thank you.
Thanks, Lucy.
Thank you. Keep it-